Humanity has always been tested. Conflict and war is the crucible through which we evolve. Every battle, those who fall will be forgotten. Those who rise up, their names will be remembered forever.
Akande Ogundimu was born in Nigeria to a well-regarded family. He was heir to its prosthetic technology company and was no stranger to the finer things in life. Due to Akande's high intelligence and charisma, he was able to help his family expand their business and position it for the future, which allowed him to dedicate his time to his competitive martial arts. He trained in traditional African fighting styles, including Dambe and Gidigba, as well as in wrestling and other modern combat systems. Ogundimu competed in tournaments all over the continent, utilizing his intuition and ability to read opponents alongside his tremendous speed and strength. After the Omni Crisis, Ogundimu lost his right arm, which led to his martial arts career being finished before it ever reached its prime. He was, however, able to recover from his injuries due to his cybernetic prosthetics company. Unfortunately, this made him ineligible to compete competitively, as it made him far stronger than he was. He tried to fill the void within himself with his business and tried to put the same love and effort into it that he had for fighting, but he found nothing that could fill the void. Until he was given a new opportunity by Akinjide Adeyemi, the second Doomfist, the Scourge of Numbani. Adeyemi offered Doomfist a chance to fight with him as a mercenary. Initially wary, Doomfist accepted and discovered that he now had an arena in which he could unleash his enhanced capabilities. Eventually, Adeyemi brought him into Talon. Talon had a belief that humanity would be made stronger through conflict. This resonated with Ogundimu's personal experiences. And to add to it, Talon's power struggles presented a new challenge that allowed him to use his talent in the boardroom along with him as a fearful combatant. Adeyemi was a useful asset to Talon, but the organization saw far greater potential in Ogundimu, with his intelligence and his ability to inspire as a commander. While Adeyemi was content to profit from raids on Numbani, Ogundimu had a grander vision. After the Venice incident, including members of Overwatch, this difference in aspiration would lead Ogundimu to kill his teacher and take on the mantle of Doomfist, claiming the extremely powerful gauntlet for himself. Talon saw that Ogundimu was a master strategist, capable of leading Talon's military arm and directing actions that required more subterfuge. He was the perfect replacement for Adeyemi, and soon after, the rest of Talon fell in line. Not long after Adeyemi's death, Doomfist was confronted by Mauga, who challenged him to a no-rules, anything-goes fight. This amused Doomfist, and he sensed something in the young man, and agreed to the fight. It ended in a draw, with both men exhausted but unwilling to admit defeat. Doomfist wasn't pressed. He offered Mauga a place with Talon, the promise of regular cybernetic upgrades, and all the chaos his two hearts could desire. Mauga would accept and join the organization. As the new Doomfist, he rose high in Talon and helped to orchestrate a conflict that the organization hoped would someday engulf the world. Under his leadership, Talon underwent a transformation to become not just a shadow presence, but a private military organization as well. While a difficult balancing act, Doomfist made sure that Talon could always influence, obfuscate, or terminate anyone who got too close to the truth. Some of Talon's leaders began to get sloppy as Doomfist's rise throughout the organization disrupted its hierarchy. 6 years prior to the Overwatch recall, while Hurricane Ferdinand ravaged the Caribbean, Doomfist held a clandestine meeting with Ramatra in Cairo, offering to pledge Talon's considerable resources to their cause. Unbeknownst to Doomfist, his accountant Maximilian was cornered by Overwatch agents in the Havana Sea Fort. In exchange for immunity, Maximilian informed the Overwatch agents that Doomfist would travel to Singapore in 3 weeks. Doomfist's plans reached a roadblock when he was confronted in Singapore by an Overwatch strike team, a team consisting of Winston, Tracer and Genji. This battle would turn part of the city into a war zone, with both sides giving it all they got.
Every battle makes us stronger.
Doomfist was able to take care of both Tracer and Genji. However, Winston engaged him in close quarters battle, and the gorilla proved to be too much for Doomfist to handle. After this defeat, Doomfist was convicted, and a court-appointed surgeon removed his cybernetic implants and hastily sutured him up. While in his holding cell, Doomfist was visited by an Overwatch agent, Gabriel Reyes. As satisfied as Reyes was to see Doomfist imprisoned, Doomfist wasn't fazed, claiming that like him, Reyes realized how broken the global order was and asked Reyes as to whether he'd actually made a difference. This was a question Reyes could not answer. Doomfist further asked if he was protecting humanity from the man in the cell or protecting criminals from his justice, another question Reyes had no answer for. And while he stayed with Overwatch in the short term, Doomfist had planted the seeds of doubt in Reyes' mind that would bloom in later years. Doomfist was imprisoned in a maximum security installation managed by Helix Security. This is where he would wait patiently for years for the events he had incited to play out. While imprisoned, Doomfist kept up to date on the events of the world outside his cell, collecting newspaper clippings about his defeat at the hands of Winston, Overwatch's possible return after its disbandment, the opening of a Doomfist exhibit displaying his gauntlet, and the assassination of Takara Mondada. Furthermore, he was able to contact and direct Talon operatives loyal to him, though this was apparently unknown to a large portion of Talon, which came under control of Viali. 1 year after the disbandment of Overwatch, Doomfist ordered an operation to his followers to retrieve Dr. Sebring de Kuiper from a black site within the United States. Reyes and Sombra took part in the operation's initial stage, and while he trusted Sombra to a point, he ordered Reyes to not lose sight of his comrade. Unknown to Reyes, Doomfist also sent in a second team led by Widowmaker, which also entered the site. Ultimately, the mission was successful, and de Kuiper was retrieved. I go into more detail about this in my Sigma video, so check that out after this. During his time in prison, his gauntlet was put on display in an Overwatch museum. Doomfist became aware of this through another newspaper clipping. At some point, Talon agents Widowmaker and Reaper tried to retrieve the gauntlet from the museum, but were fought off by Winston and Tracer. Doomfist's gauntlet was used by a bystander, Brian, to help drive the Talon operatives away. In the early hours of the morning, a Talon aircraft entered the Helix security installation holding Doomfist, bypassing their defense system without incident. Reaper emerged from the craft and broke into the facility, killing over a dozen guards in the process of freeing Ogundimu. Doomfist was able to punch his way out of his own cell. It is believed that other security breaches took place within the facility, though Helix officials have not confirmed whether other inmates or items were taken. After this, Helix lost track of Ogundimu altogether. Following his escape, Doomfist and Reaper discussed recent events carried out by Talon, including the failed assassination attempt on Kace under Viali's orders and the assassination of Mondada by Widowmaker. He then travelled to a casino in Monaco with Widowmaker and Sombra to meet with another member of the organization's inner council, Maximilian, who reaffirmed his loyalty to Doomfist's cause and warned him of rivals within the organization who were unhappy with his return. There, he and Widowmaker were attacked by Viali's men, though the pair defeated them easily. Doomfist, Reaper, Sombra, and Widowmaker later attended a masquerade ball in Venice, Italy, which was being used as a cover for a clandestine meeting of Talon's leadership. While his cohorts eliminated security and other targets, Doomfist confronted Viali on a bridge, though Viali claimed there was nothing personal behind his actions and that he was simply looking out for the well-being of the organization. After hearing this, Doomfist threw him from the bridge. Viali fell to his death. Doomfist declared that Talon was not a group of criminals concerned only with profit. Doomfist and Reaper then entered a secret boardroom where they met with Maximilian and the other members of the inner council to discuss his plans to start a new war. Doomfist began gathering people all around him who he could trust, people he could believe in. After his return to Talon, the group gave Doomfist replacement implants for the ones that had been removed during his imprisonment. They were improved versions of the original implants. Sometime later, Doomfist travelled to Numbani to retrieve his gauntlet, which was being transported to the city's Heritage Museum for a Doomfist exhibit as part of their Unity Day. Confronted by a team of newly introduced OR-15 robots, Doomfist easily defeated them in the Adawe International Terminal of the Numbani airport. Here he would reclaim his gauntlet and was ready to take his revenge on Overwatch for all the years he spent inside his prison. Doomfist sought to spread discord between humans and Omnics. He began rallying his forces, and Numbani's military was powerless to stop him. Weeks after his attack at the airport, Doomfist resurfaced at Peace Park, where he used his gauntlet to shatter the statue of Gabrielle Adawe. He gave a speech denouncing Numbani's ideals of unity, that its acceptance of Omnics into everyday life had made its people weak. He was the shepherd to the people of the city, and he was intent on keeping the wolves at bay. Whatever the truth of his beliefs, it was clear that his intent was to spread fear and discord throughout Numbani, then Africa, and then the world. Doomfist made a third attack at the Numbani Heritage Museum. He had jumped from the roof, hitting the ground with enough force that it shattered the glass doors, after which Doomfist and Talon forces entered. Here they were confronted by Orisa, and a firefight erupted. Doomfist recognized it as a reconfigured OR-15 and managed to incapacitate her. However, before he could deliver the final blow, Ify intervened, begging Doomfist not to destroy Orisa. He explained his ideology to her, and revealed that he knew her as Orisa's creator, and that he was aware of her hologram alias, where she'd been posting her progress on Orisa for the world to see. She'd made Orisa stronger than an OR-15, but not strong enough. There was, however, a place for her in Talon if she wanted it. Ify refused, and so Doomfist leapt into the air for a final blow. But luckily, Orisa came back online, and fired a graviton pulse, incapacitating his lieutenants. Doomfist, enraged, opened fire, but Orisa used her shield to protect herself and Ify from the projectiles. With the sounds of sirens approaching, Doomfist and his lieutenants made a retreat, though not without Doomfist making one last threat. "You should learn your history, girl. It's about to repeat itself." Doomfist made his final appearance in Unity Plaza, interrupting a Unity Day event. His skin was painted in white markings that honoured the spirits, and the intentions of his victory had been written as well, declaring that he was the victor of a battle that had not yet begun. Talon forces descended from above, with a firefight erupting soon after, with Doomfist and Talon on one side, and Orisa and Lucio on the other. Thanks to Ify, however, Doomfist was temporarily incapacitated. With his forces in retreat, Lucio cornered Doomfist, telling him to surrender. Doomfist, being Doomfist, refused to surrender and took BC hostage. He tossed BC over a railing, and while Orisa was able to save him, he was able to use the distraction to make his escape. With his defeat, things quieted down in Numbani. After Null Sector's failed attack on Gothenburg, the command ship that had led the attack crashed into the sea while en route back to base. Seizing the opportunity, Doomfist ordered an operation to retrieve the ship's power relay data to aid in the construction of a device Talon was working on. To this end, Sombra, Reaper and Mauga were sent to infiltrate the ship. However, the operation went awry, resulting not only in the destruction of the carrier, but retrieval of less than 100% of the data. An irate Doomfist contacted the team, demanding answers. Sombra gave her account of the events, explaining how Mauga's trigger-happy nature had sabotaged their infiltration. During the debrief, Doomfist asked Sombra,
"Very illuminating. But are you saying he's no longer loyal to us?"
Ha! You can have his loyalty. Mauga is a loose cannon, and I don't trust him.
After concluding her account, Doomfist stated that a partial victory was no victory at all, and ordered that Mauga be executed or that she'd be dealt with in turn. This didn't come to pass, however, as Mauga revealed that he'd snagged the power relay itself and gave it to Sombra to give to Doomfist before parachuting out of the dropship. And that does it for our story on Doomfist. I really like Doomfist. I really enjoyed him when he came out. I thought he was a good, menacing villain. His origin story is probably one of the best. It's got that sick anime style and a really good fight scene between Tracer, Genji and himself. The animation really does show how Doomfist is able to think on his feet and learn as he fights. I'd personally love to see more for Overwatch done in this style. I think this sort of anime vibe really suits the game. And I would love to see more of Doomfist's past animated like this. His fight between Orisa, his fight between Adeyemi, I'd love to see two Doomfists battling it out. When it comes to his motive though, I don't really understand. Or more so, I can't really get behind it. Doomfist wants to push for a new war between humans and Omnics so that humanity can continue to evolve. Where I do think humanity shouldn't get lazy, I do think striving for peace between Omnics and humans and making life more comfortable and easy to live is the better way to go. This whole thing of the weak are going to die off and only the strong will survive, I don't really understand, because it is the job of the strong to protect the weak. That is how it has been. But I like that I can't get behind Doomfist's message. It really makes him a different antagonist to that of Ramatra. Ramatra I can sympathize for, I can get behind what Ramatra is fighting for. It makes me want to see Ramatra win. But when it comes to Doomfist, he's an antagonist I don't want to see win. I want to see the hero overcome this challenge. And that's how I like the dynamic between Ramatra and Doomfist. One of them I can get behind and actually want to see win, and the other I want to see fall. Both are really good villains, and both have causes they truly believe in. Doomfist is a great character. I won't lie, I do miss original Doomfist. I miss him as a DPS and his DPS kit. Haven't really played him much since then, but I still really like Doomfist. He's a pain in the ass to play against though. Cole Cassidy, an outlaw with a taste for good liquor and a knack for dealing justice on his own terms. Once a prominent member of the infamous Deadlock biker gang and the former agent of Blackwatch, Cassidy is one of the most loved characters in Overwatch 2.
I've been kinda busy.
Just a quick mention before we get into it, I've got a little something teased for next week, so make sure you stick around till the very end. But as usual, grab a snack, sit back, and let's take a look at Overwatch 2's gunslinger, Cole Cassidy. Cole grew up on a small farm in Texas, and it was here he learned how to shoot. At some point, he would hotwire and steal a motorbike, which would lead to him being arrested. He wrote a hefty piece to the parole board for submission. In his youth, he would jump from one job to another, one such job being a pork processing plant, where he would have an experience putting him off eating pork for good, until eventually he would find a job at the Ace Valentine mega farm, where he'd become friends with a guy named Julian. While here, Julian bet that Cassidy could shoot a playing card with his revolver from 50 yards away. Cassidy, being a great shot, won the bet for Julian, but the losers didn't hold up their end, and a fist fight broke out. This would lead to Cassidy being arrested by the arriving sheriff, and his revolver being taken. While in prison, he would meet a girl named Elizabeth Ash, who was also recently arrested. They hit it off with each other, talking about what had happened, and discussing what they were going to do afterwards. However, Ash was released shortly due to her parents bailing her out. The next day, the sheriff would release Cassidy, but keep hold of his revolver. Both Cole and Julian were fired from the mega farm, as Cassidy put 3 workers in the med bay. However, a familiar face would find him at the mega farm. Ash had arrived in her family car and offered him a ride. Cassidy would accept, and they would head to Ash's home, the Lead Rose Manor. He knew she was rich, but not that rich. This honestly surprised him. It's worth mentioning that at some point before all this, Cole Cassidy would go by the pseudonym Jesse McCree. After reaching the manor, Ash would get straight to it and wanted to see how well he could shoot. She would give him an arbalest revolver. He showed his skill by successfully striking each target Ash gave him with great accuracy. Ash was turning 18 in 3 months, and with that, her parents would be cutting her off. She had intended to run several heists against her parents' company and sell off everything she would steal from them to give her enough money to do whatever she wanted. She asked Cole to help, and he negotiated a 20% cut. Unbeknownst to him, Ash would have happily accepted 30%. He was in. Their first target would be an arbalest fulfillment center. They gained access easily due to Ash having the schematics of the facility. They made it inside, but Cassidy cautioned Ash, saying that her parents might consider cutting her off much earlier. She refused and was keen to continue. They found 4 crates of Seraphim rifles and loaded them onto a cargo elevator. But due to the crates being moved outside their intended location, a proximity mine warning would be triggered and was getting ready to detonate. Cass would grab a pair of rifles and they would climb up the elevator shaft before Bob, Ash's butler, would pull them to safety. They would escape in their truck and Cass would drive while Ash would take care of the pursuing security drones. They managed to escape, but their truck was destroyed and they would be forced to walk across the desert before Bob could pick them up. Once they returned to her manor, Cass wasn't too up for more heists. Ash wanted to keep going and wouldn't be persuaded otherwise. Ash had a few ideas for people to help. They would need a hacker and someone who knew their way around demolitions. She would offer Cass an out, but he would give in and choose to stay, fearing he might lose a bigger payout. He tracked down Julian, who was familiar with demolitions, while Ash looked for a hacker. With Bob, they would arrive at Cutthroat Trouts, a bar where Cassidy had set up a meeting with Julian. They would meet up along with a hacker by the name of Frankie, who Ash managed to track down. She laid down her plan, but Cassidy wasn't sure he could trust Frankie due to her being affiliated with the Diamondbacks before. The Diamondbacks were a rival gang and had a lot more resources than Ash and Cassidy. Julian headed off for a little and returned saying he had made a bet that Ash would race someone named Desba on the Trout's hovercycle track. If Ash won, they'd get 4 hovercycles. If Desba won, they would get Bob. Ash was furious, and Cassidy pointed out how it was illegal to wage omnics these days, but no one here cared for the law. And if Ash were to back out, Bob would be given up as forfeit. Luckily for Bob, and to the relief of Cassidy, Ash would win. After recruiting their hacker and their demolitionist, they would plan another heist that would be known as the Briscoe incident. When planning to attack a convoy which had a valuable schematic drive on board, they would have Frankie hack the main transport, while Ash and Cass would engage the convoy directly, and Julian would cover their escape with explosives. However, the plan went south almost immediately when they realised the convoy had more than one main transport, meaning it would take longer for Frankie to find which one had the drive in it. Ash refused to abort the mission, so she and Cass began firing. In the end, the heist was ruled as a success. Later on, the gang would conduct multiple heists, and Cassidy would suggest the gang take on a name. The Vultures, the Shadowbats, the Copper Coyotes, but Ash would reject these names. They had a meetup with a client at the Hopper. Their client, Liu, arrived but sold the gang out to the Diamondbacks. Marco, leader of the Diamondbacks, forced them to lower their masks and knew Ash was the one in charge. He stated they got too greedy and now had competition with the Diamondbacks. Julian tried to intervene but caught a nasty punch off Marco. Cass almost dove into the fight, but Ash held him back. Shortly after, the Diamondbacks would leave. Later on, it would be revealed Julian was working with the Diamondbacks and was selling the gang out to them. He told this to Cassidy shortly after Ash's 18th birthday, in which the Diamondbacks had tried to burn down Ash's manor. Cassidy refused to give himself up to force Ash to pay with the gang's profits, so he was beaten and taken to the gang's hideout at Deadlock Gorge. The gang made an attempt to save Cassidy, but it was ultimately thwarted due to Julian selling them out once again. Frankie, however, was able to simulate a police raid to distract the Diamondbacks. They would take Julian captive and have him lead them to Cassidy's cell. Upon Cassidy walking out, he would break Julian's nose. Ash was injured in the ensuing battle. As soon as the Diamondbacks realised they were being fooled, she would give herself up to the Diamondbacks to allow Cassidy and the rest to escape. Ash, however, was able to turn the tables and bring the Diamondbacks to her side. She would then take control of their base, and Cassidy would finally come up with a name for their gang: the Deadlock Rebels. Their heists would continue for some time, but something would happen to Cassidy that would change the course of his life forever. After being busted in a sting operation conducted by none other than Overwatch, Cassidy and a few members of the gang would be captured. While being held in a cell, he would be approached by Gabriel Reyes and be given the choice to either join Blackwatch or rot in a maximum security prison. Cassidy would choose to join Blackwatch. He would get along well with Anna Amari, since she had noticed his talent with shooting and ability to stay cool under fire, as well as his natural charm. She would give him a few pointers on shooting, and he would attribute his modern skill to some of these lessons. He saw Blackwatch as a way to make amends for his past sins by righting injustice in the world. He will go on to have mixed relationships with the other members of Blackwatch, especially Moira O'Dearin, who he thought her hiring to Blackwatch was a mistake. Some point during his time with Overwatch, he would be appointed to the Echo Project and be instructed by Reyes to protect the project's head, Dr. Mina Liao, as well as keeping the project a secret. She was initially wary of him, given he was a Blackwatch agent and his reputation with them, but Cassidy reassured her that what was happening here was between them. Liao would show him what she was working on, a robot named Echo. One day, during Echo's testing, she would eliminate the wrong target and show visible signs of distress. Cassidy was not meant to interact with her, but decided to anyway, and reassured the robot that everyone makes mistakes and that she'll get it right the next time. Then he cracked some jokes with the robot, causing her to laugh for the first time. However, sometime after the London uprising, Liao's lab would be attacked and she would be killed, and the Echo Project would be terminated, and the robot would be placed in quarantine. Now, I'm going to touch briefly on this part. It is the fated Rialto mission. If you want to hear more in detail about this, check out either the Reaper or the Genji and Hanzo videos. So, here we go. Cassidy would be sent on a mission to Rialto with Blackwatch to retrieve Talon arms dealer Antonio Bartolotti. They would go in after dark and take out any Talon operatives they encountered. The mission went awry after Reyes decided to kill Antonio on the spot instead of extracting him. This was to the disdain of Cassidy, who would say that this wasn't like the killing they've done before. What they did was an execution. They killed Antonio on the spot. Due to this, the members of Blackwatch would be put on suspension, and Cassidy would be questioned by Morrison, asking if he had anything else to add after Reyes gave his recount of the situation. Cassidy agreed that Antonio got what was coming to him, but it didn't sit well, as he thought this was the deciding moment, that this was where it all started to go wrong. Still under suspension, he would be sent to recon the ground situation during the London uprising, despite no Overwatch agents being allowed to operate in the area. When Reyes was questioned as to why he was there, Reyes would simply state he was merely on vacation, which Anna found to be too out of character for Cassidy. After the uprising, he would lose his arm and have it replaced with a cybernetic one, which took him time to get used to. He reflected on this and thought about how hard it would have been for Genji to get used to the majority of his body now being cybernetic. As Overwatch began to sink and rogue alliances started forming within Blackwatch, seeking to bring Overwatch crashing down, he decided to go underground. After Overwatch went down, he would wander the United States as a gunslinger for hire, and there's also evidence to suggest he was a bounty hunter, only giving enough information to say that his bills were always paid. One day, Cassidy managed to get a ride on a hyper train heading for Houston, Texas, and by managed to get a ride, I mean sitting on top of the train, stating that they don't sell folks like him a ticket. Suddenly, Talon soldiers were hijacking the train, rappelling from helicopters on board. The first thing he noticed was that the Talon soldiers were using Blackwatch tactics. Deciding to jump into action, he would make his way down to the train. Cassidy would take care of all the soldiers he encountered and learn that they were after something at the back of the train. He found the device they were after and dumped it off the side of the train, saying Talon would go after that and leave them alone. But now, his face was seen by everyone on board, so he sat down in the seat to enjoy the ride. He was informed by a steward that the robbery was being pinned on him, so he told the steward to let the police know what really happened and to fudge their arrival time. Later, Winston would initiate Overwatch's recall, and Cassidy would decide it was time for a reunion. Cassidy would learn of a military transport heading through Route 66 at 11:55 AM. He would anonymously tip off the Deadlock gang that the train was full of ordnance and weaponry, knowing his old friend Ash wouldn't be able to resist making the score. A little bit beforehand, he would also receive a letter from someone saying, "Charmer, time to talk," with coordinates that led to Cairo. Instantly recognized it as Anna Amari, he kept it in mind as he set off to Route 66. Cassidy would relax at the Panorama Diner and enjoy a coffee as well as a slice of apple pie while he waited for the heist to take place. The train was right on time, bang on 11:55 AM. And just like he expected, the heist began. The train was derailed by an explosion, so it was time for Cassidy to get to work. He paid for his meal and left the diner into the cloud of dust. He would walk out to greet his old friend Ash and the rest of the gang.
Jesse McCree.
She would immediately recognize that it was him who sent in the tip, and Cass would confirm this himself.
Yeah, you never been one to shy away from a good tip.
Hey, we worked hard for this score. You'd best move on now.
Cassidy would tell the gang they could have everything they wanted, except one crate. But Ash wouldn't give it up. At exactly high noon, a fight would break out. Even though the gunslinger was outnumbered, his amazing accuracy and skill to stay calm under pressure would allow him to turn the tide in his favor.
All right, Ash. Here it comes.
After knocking the gang out with an explosion, tying them up, and replacing the hat on Bob's head that had been separated from his body, he sent them back to the hideout on the dolly they brought to load the cargo. Focusing on the crate he wanted, he would place a small chip in it for it to be activated. The contents of the cargo would be none other than the robot Echo.
Hey there, cowboy.
Welcome back, partner.
Who Cassidy would inform that Overwatch was getting back together and that they needed her. Asking her to say hi to Winston for him, they parted ways as he drove off on Ash's hoverbike.
Whatever.
Later, he would pass the gang on their way back to the hideout and upset Ash even more upon her recognizing her bike.
McCree shows his stupid mug and everyone just falls to complete pieces. I should have just put a bullet in him the minute he showed up. That's my bike! McCree! Oh, I hate that guy.
Soon afterwards, Cassidy would head to Cairo to meet up with Anna and Mary, where she informed him of what Reyes, or Reaper, was up to, hunting down former Overwatch agents. He asked her to return and help the organization, but she was reluctant and didn't want her generation to get involved, due to the fear of making the same mistakes as before. After being attacked by Talon and fighting their way to safety, she told him to seek out new recruits, including her daughter Farah. It was around this point he would also drop the pseudonym Jesse McCree, as he wanted to be more honest with his team, and more importantly, himself. He would go on to recruit Diva, Zarya, Baptiste, and Farah for the new era of Overwatch and assist the team in fending off Null Sector's attacks.
Hey, we didn't get a hug.
Cassidy is in my top 5 favorite Overwatch characters. It's just so hard to hate him. He's an insanely cool revolver-wielding cowboy who is voiced by none other than Matthew Mercer, one of the coolest voice actors ever and a massive pillar of inspiration for me personally. His in-game kit is incredibly fun, and with one of the most iconic ultimate voice lines, he is easily and by far one of the coldest Overwatch characters out there. Even though he doesn't have much elements of tragedy or sadness in his backstory, it's outweighed by the amazing story of a man on his path to redemption, from living a life of crime to fighting the injustice of the world, fighting for a better future, all the while learning to be at peace with himself, learning to come to terms with what he's done. To move on, he needed to be honest with those around him, and more importantly himself. Cole Cassidy, Overwatch 2's gunslinging outlaw, futuristic cowboy, will always be one of my favourite heroes in both character and gameplay. I love him so much, and I am so glad he exists. And the life and personality that Matt Mercer brings to him makes me love him so much more.
You're one of those heroes, aren't you?
Not anymore.
I think you are.
Soldier 76. One of Overwatch's most recognizable characters, rocking a sick leather jacket and an even cooler mask. His past, however, is shrouded in anger and hardship. From being a soldier during the Omni Crisis, to being the head of Overwatch, to its inevitable downfall. This is the story of Jack Morrison. Soldier 76. It all starts in Bloomington, Indiana, where he was born. He was raised Catholic and his family were honest working farmers. He would get up at the crack of dawn to help his dad out mucking stalls. Afterwards, he would hang out with his friends at a local ice cream shop and spend time at the football field. As much as he enjoyed his life, he couldn't wait to get away from it, hoping to enlist in the military as soon as he turned 18. And that he did, packing his bags and leaving for the nearest recruitment facility. His plan was to do a short stint in the military and return to the family farm. But his work ethic and courageous personality would catch the eye of the military brass. He would quickly climb ranks and was viewed as fun, earnest, and honest by all his peers. Soon after this, the Omni Crisis would hit hard and heavy. By this time, he had earned his way to the rank of First Sergeant in the US Army. Here, he would meet and fall in love with Vincent, and the two would engage in a relationship. He often hoped the war would just end so he could return to his normal life, but due to the stress of war, a full commitment to a relationship was not possible. He was approached for inclusion into the Soldier Enhancement Program 3 years before the beginning of the Omni Crisis, but when it started, he was approached formally about the matter. He was eager to join, but his commanding officers didn't want to risk him dying in the process, as they saw him too valuable to lose. However, he would eventually join late and would be classed as Candidate 76. Many of the other candidates would haze him for joining late, stating it as cowardice, but one soldier who did not participate was Gabriel Reyes. Despite their different backgrounds, the two would become friends quickly. The two would undergo the genetic process to become super soldiers, and it was grueling. Of the hundreds that signed up, most of them would die. Morrison would state that it wasn't a pleasant journey. Multiple injections, unbelievable pain, surgeries, organs rejecting the massive changes placed upon them. He was in and out of coma for weeks. He doesn't even fully know what they did to him, nor what it may do to him over time. But he made it, alongside Reyes. 24 hours before they were given the all clear, or even publicly announced to the world's governments, they were already heading back to the fight. They had been sitting idly for too long at this point. It was time to put these enhancements to the test, to see what weapons they had become. They headed out to fight, and held the junction back from attacking Omnic forces. During the fight, Morrison was shot 3 times, but due to him now being built like a literal tank, he didn't even notice. By the time the battle was over, half the unit that was with them were dead, and nearly every survivor was wounded. Dr. Victoria Naughton visited the battlefield herself afterwards to see her handiwork with Morrison. Him and Reyes would leave on a transport with her, only then noticing his wounds. He looked around at the soldiers in the transport, dead or dying. Not enough meds or bandages to go around. He felt like he failed them, that they were his responsibility. Naughton reminded him of something Napoleon once said, that he'd rather have lucky generals than good ones. Morrison and Reyes would give each other a searing glance after she turned away. If this was the outcome of luck, they didn't want it. But Morrison was now being seen as something of a legend. This golden-haired hero, showing up to save the day, and the lives of hundreds of soldiers, if not thousands. By this stage, the governments of the world were failing to stop the attacks of the Omnics, and the war was looking bleak. The UN were busy with the formation of an international task force under the name of Overwatch. Reyes and Morrison were approached at the same time, but Reyes was first to accept the offer, making Morrison the second member of the team. It was also due to the paperwork provided by Naughton to Gabriel Adawe. It was a list of all surviving Soldier Enhancement Program members, and since Reyes was Soldier 24, which came before 76, he was chosen first. Reyes was chosen to be Overwatch's first strike commander, due to him being older and more experienced. Morrison was happy to join Overwatch, and would be vital to its long-term success. With Reyes and Morrison being Overwatch's only current members, since they were both American, accusations of American favoritism fell on Gabrielle. Morrison would address these accusations stoically, and with a couple of carefully worded interviews, stated that despite this, he remained a loyal American, but would also intend to be a reliable and objective member of an international organization. Soon after, Anna Amari, Reinhard Wilhelm, and Torbjorn Lindholm would be recruited for Overwatch's strike team. Now, Overwatch had its strike team, and were now taking part in a number of clandestine missions in places like Kyoto, Darkhan, and Chicago. After the Chicago mission, Morrison brought up the idea to Adawe for recruiting a sixth member, Dr. Mina Liao, someone who had helped create the Omnics. She'd work in the background and help them learn how to fight the Omnics, with Morrison stating that there was no one else better to help than someone who created them. Now, before I move on to the next part, I am going to tell it in very brief detail, as there is enough here to make a small video on its own. So, later on, he would lead a force of 30 Overwatch troops into Canada with Torbjorn and Liao, on what would be a trial operation that the UN had agreed to. Here he would meet Vivian Chase, and together with her unit of CAF troops, they would evacuate civilians. During this deployment to Canada, they would plan to move through Ottawa down into Detroit to take out an Omnium station there. They would come with many different ways to take out the Omnium, Morrison suggesting that they could just blow it up, but due to Omniums having fusion cores, the fallout would be immense. So just blowing it sky high was unfortunately not viable. Along the way, they would meet many instances of Omnic resistance. They would be stuck going back and forth. However, slowly but surely, they were managing to push the Omnic forces back. Eventually, they were able to push down into Detroit, and Liao, Chase, and Morrison would attack and successfully shut down the Omnium in the area. Liao had proven herself, and Morrison offered Chase a position in Overwatch, but she declined, stating Canada still needed her. In the last days of the war, Morrison led a strike against the heart of it all, against Anubis itself. With himself, Reyes, and Reinhardt leading a strike into the Temple of Anubis, they would create an opening for Overwatch engineers to get in and isolate the rogue god program from the outside world. This was celebrated by many as humanity's victory, but Morrison warned people not to celebrate too early, as the crisis waged on for several more months after shutting down Anubis, due to plenty of warbots remaining loyal to the AI. Overwatch had proven that it could work. Jack was selected as the organization's first official strike commander over Reyes. Anna would state that this was because he looked the part of a war hero, heroic, confident, compassionate. It was believed he could rebuild the world in a way Reyes couldn't. And honestly, Reyes agreed with him. He'd much rather be behind the scenes anyway. Overwatch would then change from a surgical strike team to a global agency. The first 10 years of its existence would be considered its golden age. Morrison would expand the organization tremendously. Notably after Operation White Dome, he would ask that Overwatch fund the schooling of Angela Ziegler, hoping to recruit her one day. He would also recruit Vivian Chase, who this time would accept. Overwatch was at its peak. Missions were being conducted to great success, showing the resolve and good the organization could pull off. Morrison envisioned a new world, one that Overwatch was the spearhead of. Despite some people still trying to paint Overwatch in the worst light possible, it was doing exceptionally well. But soon, it would all come crashing down. 5 years before the end of Overwatch, its facilities in Oslo would be attacked. Morrison would inform the press that the culprits were unknown, but they would not stop until they were brought to justice. After investigation, he confirmed that they had a number of suspects, but refused to say anything further. Another incident would occur after the Rialto mission went wrong led by Overwatch's Blackwatch squad. I've talked about this a lot, but this is mostly seen as the point where Overwatch really started to go downhill. If you want to hear more in detail, I recommend these videos on the screen now. So, to briefly put it, Reyes makes a really bad call and puts the organization in the spotlight of the world, and leaves Morrison to address the political repercussions of the incident. He would interrogate both Reyes and Cassidy on the situation, demanding to know what happened. This would push Reyes and Morrison further apart and deepen the ever-growing wounds between them, and those wounds would eventually lead to the downfall of it all. Years further down the line, Overwatch was taking shots from all sides. World governments were looking down on them, believing they could no longer keep the world safe. They were suffering attacks from their enemies, and an internal rebellion was brewing. Morrison was dealing with all of this. The immense pressure of it all was on his shoulders. Soon a riot would break out against Morrison and his leadership, with Reyes leading its charge. A fight would break out between the two and end up causing an explosion in Overwatch's Swiss headquarters. Both men were believed to be killed in the fight. Morrison was believed to be dead, and a funeral would be held in his honour, with Reinhardt speaking fondly of him. A cement headstone would be placed to remember the fallen strike commander who once led the greatest organisation in the world. But our story doesn't end there. 5 years after the downfall of Overwatch, a number of attacks were being made on shady corporations and former Overwatch facilities, all by one unidentified male known as Soldier 76. Each attack resulted in some sort of Overwatch tech being stolen. No one was killed in these attacks, and personnel would only suffer minor injuries. The US government labelled him as a threat, and an international manhunt began in search for the masked shadow. Writers of the Zurich archive recognised the term Soldier 76 could be traced back to the Soldier Enhancement Program, but they didn't speculate on that any further. In truth, this was Jack Morrison, very much so alive and kicking. He was on a personal mission, a mission of vengeance against those who brought down Overwatch. Soon he would track down and hunt members of the Los Muertos gang in Mexico. While here, he would stalk a number of members transporting guns and arms illegally, instilling fear into the hearts of the gangsters. He would engage and deal with them all swiftly.
No, please. These aren't your streets anymore.
No, please,
Unfortunately, though, after a truck shows up to bail them out, a grenade is lobbed by one of them near the feet of a young girl, and 76 needs to choose between saving the young girl or pursuing the gang members. He chooses to save the girl. When asked why, he states,
Why?
Old habits die hard, I guess. Run home, kid. It ain't safe out here.
she recognizes him as one of the heroes her mother would tell her about, the heroes of Overwatch. To which he responds,
You're one of those heroes, aren't you?
Not anymore.
He then disappears into the dark, leaving the girl to go home after returning her purse. When she returns, it's revealed he followed her home on the rooftops to ensure she got home safe. Later on, when Winston's recall would go out, he'd say, "What would you have me do then? Fly to Gibraltar and join up with Winston? You think the same people who brought down Overwatch won't take him down too? Let Winston play hero. I'll do what needs to be done. Reyes, Ogundimu, Maximilian, Viali, Sombra, Udiran, and the rest of them, they'll be dealt with." stating he has no intention of rejoining Overwatch, that he will continue his crusade of vengeance to hunt down his enemies one by one. Afterwards, he goes and meets up with Ana in Egypt, glad to find her alive after all this time. Now, there's plenty to talk about with Morrison. Everything I touched on here was very brief and not in a lot of detail. His lore goes so deep and has so many intricate details about battles he's been in and things he's done. But this video is getting long enough. I just want to talk about how I think Soldier's character has been sort of wasted over the years. In the cinematic, we get this hardened, grizzled super soldier who is more than capable of fighting battles on his own. Watching that cinematic gives me the perfect feeling of coolness. But he's also terrifying in it. This man, given these super enhancements to fight a war, he is superior in strength, speed, combat, agility, everything. It's like watching a dark, vigilante Captain America Batman mix. It's perfect. We don't get that anymore. I don't get the same sense of scary vigilante anymore. And I say this for a lot of Overwatch characters. They have such potential. I don't blame Overwatch though. I blame Blizzard as a whole. As of recently, I have been very burnt out of Overwatch. I miss it so much, but I just can't bring myself to play it. I love it, and always will love it, but I think I'm just burnt out from playing it. I think Blizzard really did take this game, this universe, out back and shoot it. It's fun, don't get me wrong, but its potential is so wasted. And I don't say this to doom on the game. I say this because it's genuinely saddening. I don't say it just to hate on Overwatch because it's Overwatch. I say it because I care for what has been such a big part of my life. The best thing I think they can do for us is put a big investment into an arcane style show. And do it well, lore accurate, and invest so much love and passion into it. Will it happen? Not likely. Blizzard care too much about making money easily instead of having to put passion into stuff, which hinders the people that do want to put their heart and soul into the game. And when I go back and I watch the cinematics, and especially after watching Soldiers, it makes me realize that we could have had it all. He is such a wasted character. To not see more of him is a travesty. He's so cool and there's so much emotion in his character. The burden of Overwatch, the effect the Omnicrisis had on him, losing his friends, the ones he saw as a family. He is a living weapon and believes at this point that's all he's good for. Being a soldier, fighting war after war. I'd love to see some emotional scene where one day he puts down the gun and realizes he doesn't need to fight anymore. I'm glad there is so much lore to him, but I want to see all this played out. I would love to see this put into an animated show or something, rather than it just being text. He makes plenty of comic appearances, and he does have an appearance in the anime short, but I need more from this game, dude. I need more from this universe. Ana Amari is one of the founding members of Overwatch, being involved on the original strike team and proving to be of great assistance in ending the Omnic crisis. Welcome back to the channel, my name's al-g-man, and today I want to take you guys on a little journey into the lore surrounding the previously world's most deadliest sniper. Grab a snack and let's take a look at Ana Amari. Hailing from a long line of decorated soldiers, Ana would inspire confidence and loyalty in her comrades. She bears a tattoo of the Eye of Horus as a symbol of protection. Like the tattoo during the Omnic crisis and in the Egyptian military, her call sign was Horus. And still to this day in Egypt, she is regarded as a hero. She was regarded as one of the most deadly snipers in the world and had an incredibly high kill count. And it was from a young age where she learned how to handle a rifle. By the time she finished high school, she was an expert marksman, and as such, after graduation, she would enlist in the Egyptian army. 2 rules were drilled into her head: never hesitate, never look away, and cover your team at all costs. While here, she was also taught how to do basic medical, and later became a member of the El Saka forces. Her military record was spotless, and very quickly she became considered the best sniper in the world. Her right eye was replaced by a cybernetic implant, which allowed her to aim better and hone her accuracy to terrifying levels. It was while she was at a coffee shop in Cairo she would meet Sam English, a Canadian diplomat, and splitting time between Egypt and Canada, the two would start dating. Now, while the two were often in transit, things changed when Anna realized she was pregnant. So Sam and Anna would settle down in Cairo, where Anna would give birth to her daughter, Fariha. It would be 6 years after the birth of Fariha that the Omnic crisis would begin, and the war inflicted a heavy toll on Egypt. The country's depleted and undermanned security forces meant that they truly relied heavily on these elite snipers. Anna among them. Her aim was impeccable, legendary, and there were rumours that she was single-handedly turning battles against Omnics herself. Now, whether there is any truth to that claim, we don't know, but the Zurich archives do state that Anna was responsible from preventing many battles turning into absolute massacres. She was living proof that hard work, determination, and pure talent could still avail against Omnic forces. Due to her superior aim, her incredible decision making, and natural instincts, she became a prime selection for the Overwatch strike team. Although Anna being chosen was a case of politics, came with a little bit of controversy. The first 2 founding members were Jack Morrison and Gabriel Reyes, who were both American, which led to accusations against Gabrielle Adawe and her team for making secret concessions with the United States and accusations of favoritism. On the other hand, however, Anna had no cybernetic enhancements. You know, the eye, it's just an eye, it doesn't really count as, like cyborg. So they thought this would be good for public relations, and not to mention she was already admired by the people of Cairo. However, her recruitment did not come without critics. Some seized on her gender, her nationality, claimed that she was being tokenized to hide the American exceptionalism that some claimed was the heart of Overwatch. Adawe would stick up for Anna and eviscerate any of these critics, and the UN approved of Amari joining the Overwatch strike team. In Egypt, Anna's recruitment to Overwatch was contentious. Many of her colleagues were ecstatic that Anna was being chosen for this important position to help save the world against this Omnic threat. However, her superiors would fight tooth and nail to keep her within Egypt's military forces, viewing it as a massive loss to their manpower. Despite this, however, Egypt's government was more committed to Overwatch than any of its military, and Anna was assigned to Overwatch to commence her training. She reached the rank of captain and was 3rd in command under Jack Morrison and Reyes. While she was in the field with the rest of her strike team, Anna spent weeks combating Omnic forces. During the first few nights of battle, Anna wouldn't sleep, while the rest of her comrades were able to sleep easily. Anna had to figure out how to quiet her fear. She would realize that the time between explosions was an indicator as to how many Omnics there were and how far away. Throughout this, she would work out their attack patterns. But suddenly, after weeks of combat, the machines fell silent, and she thought they were retreating to regroup. From inside a military tent, she would converse with her daughter, offering her reassurance. The conversation would be broken by an explosion, where Faria would ask her mother, are the Omnics going to attack where she lives? And Anna silently resolved that her daughter would never feel fear like this again. She would then leave the tent to join Gabriel Reyes on a night raid. Moving on a bit down the line, after the awakening, Anubis lost a massive portion of its outstanding forces. It moved to consolidate its remaining manpower to Cairo. While this event had tilted the war in humanity's favour, it was estimated that humanity only had 9 days to recover from this massive blow to its power. They had to move quickly, and due to Reyes pushing at the matter, Adawe dispatched Overwatch to Cairo to deliver the final blow to the rogue AI. Overwatch would join forces with the Egyptian military, and Anna's intimate knowledge of the city and pre-existing relationships with many of the high-ranking officers made this collaboration easy. In the following operation, Anubis would be successfully shut down. But Ana would come to regret Overwatch's actions, given that shutting down Anubis would have adverse effects on the city of Cairo. After the Omnic Crisis, Overwatch was expanded in size and scope. Ana would serve for many years under Strike Commander Jack Morrison, being his second in command. During this time, she would raise her daughter Fariha and teach her martial arts. Despite her responsibilities in leading the organization, she refused to step away from combat. Later on, she would be demoted to third in command, where she had little free time. What time she had was divided between her daughter and training the next generation of Egyptian military forces. Some had questioned the wisdom of preparing future soldiers for war while also being part of an organization that was in place to prevent any further war. But Ana would ignore these comments. On the familial front, Ana was aware of her daughter's desire to join Overwatch, but Ana was strongly against it, which would eventually lead to a strained relationship between mother and daughter. At some point, Fariha would ask for a toy rifle, in which Ana would refuse, telling her daughter that she'd shoot her eye out. Ana would later come to regret these comments. Ana was considered one of the poster figures for Overwatch. She was plastered on recruitment posters everywhere, and she even had a corresponding character in the Overwatch cartoon. At some point, Ana was responsible for the assassination of the Vukoski kingpins. At a range of 300 meters, she shot once, and both fell. Ana would go on to remain in active duty in Overwatch well into her 50s, and at some point in Watchpoint Gibraltar, herself and Reinhardt once danced in the base's command center until dawn. Later, she would meet the wife of fellow agent Gerard Lacroix, his wife being Amelia Lacroix. 2 weeks after, Amelie would be kidnapped by Talon. Amelie would be retrieved, but then Gerard would be killed, and Amelie would be kidnapped once again. When Fariha turned 14, she would have an argument with her mother about joining Overwatch. Fariha would give her reasons, but Ana wasn't listening. But she would later realize that if Fariha were to have joined Overwatch, it would have strengthened their bond. The argument was so bad that the two didn't speak for the next 2 months, and Fariha never again brought up her dreams of joining Overwatch in her mother's presence ever again. Later on, Ana would be present when Reyes brought in former outlaw Cole Cassidy, and Ana would say that Cassidy possessed great skill, talent, and the ability to remain cool under fire. She could tell that Cassidy was trapped by the life he'd previously been in, so she and Reyes would both hone Cassidy's skills, bringing him into Overwatch. 9 years before present day, Ana would be present alongside Morrison and Reyes as they monitored the situation happening in King's Row, where Null Sector was striking. In a conversation with Morrison, Ana admitted to wanting to do something to help the people that were trapped within the city. While Morrison shared this desire, Overwatch had come under scrutiny and was forbidden from intervening in the area. Eventually, Morrison would relent and send 4 agents in to stop the King's Row uprising. As the years went on, Ana would recruit Freya Skov, bringing her into Overwatch to lead the organization's search and rescue team. Ana was later present in Polynesia, where Overwatch Strike Team agents engaged the Deep Sea Raiders, with search and rescue being responsible for civilian evacuation. In one operation, Gabriel Reyes would move his forces in before search and rescue could evacuate all civilians. This would result in 14 civilian deaths. An enraged Emre Sorolu would confront Jack Morrison on this matter, in which Ana would be present for the confrontation. Her last mission, however, would occur in Poland. Ana was on an anti-Talon operation that was being conducted by Overwatch. Talon had taken a number of scientists hostage, and Ana was in charge of providing cover to a strike team led by Jack Morrison. And then, a duel would occur. Ana noticed there was a Talon sniper taking out Overwatch agents, which led to this duel taking place across the urban terrain. Ana was able to temporarily incapacitate this Talon sniper, but upon seeing her face, she realized she knew who this was. Amélie Lacroix was the one battling her, and in a slight moment of hesitation, it gave Widowmaker just enough time to regroup and fire back. This shot would connect with Ana, shooting straight through Ana's scope and into her cybernetic eye. It was then the whole world believed Anna Amari was dead. But in truth, Anna would survive the encounter. She was gravely wounded and her cybernetic eye was completely destroyed, which was a great loss for Anna. This cybernetic eye enhanced her vision by 6 times, 600 with the scope, but now she was in a coma and had lost one of her greatest assets. She was given full honours posthumously and she spent years in a coma. She was treated by a Polish doctor named Dr. Lee. When Anna awoke, she would ask Dr. Lee to keep her life a secret. During her months-long recovery, she was able to recall slight details of the mission. During this time, she had even let her daughter believe that she was dead, a decision she would come to regret years later. Some time after, Anna would wrestle with the weight of a life spent in combat and chose to stay out of further global conflict. She had heard about the destruction of Overwatch headquarters and the supposed death of Jack Morrison, although she had her doubts that he was actually dead. During her travels, she would pass through Junkrat once or twice and would end up returning to Cairo. She had originally planned to live quietly so that she could be near her daughter, but the longer she lived there, the more she realised that problems that were facing Cairo at the minute were all due to Overwatch's decisions. As time passed, she could not sit on the sidelines while people threatened her city and her people. So she would rejoin forces and the fight to protect her country from the elements that would destabilise it, and most importantly, to keep her family safe. She would write letters to Fariha explaining her absence. However, she would never receive a response. Continuing her fight for justice, Anna operated under the alias of Shrike and was wanted for espionage, theft and assault within Egypt. She used the necropolis as her hideout and base of operations, and she would take care of the relics that she would find there before sending them to a doctor. She'd come back to Egypt in part due to her guilt over what Overwatch had done to the city and the fallout of the Anubis project. Disguised as a masked bounty hunter, Anna would sabotage several Talon operations within the area, which eventually drew some attention from Talon operative Reaper, which in turn attracted the attention of Jack Morrison. Still alive, despite being, supposedly dead. Reaper had an associate by the name of Abdul Hakim. After days of lying in wait, she would catch sight of Hakim in one of his palaces, and this conflict would come to a head when Anna and Morrison were led into a trap at Hakim's compound in Giza, leading to a battle between the 3 former comrades. Though Anna sided with Jack and forced Reaper to retreat and unmasking him, she was disturbed by his visual appearance and parting words, reminding her that Overwatch had been responsible for the suffering of Cairo. Following this encounter, Anna would explain that she cared about Jack, not the war he was fighting, and resolved to watch over him as the 2 departed. Later on, Jack and Anna would go underground, which forced Anna to take Jack to her base at the necropolis due to him being wounded. Later on down the line, they would run into Angela Ziegler and another incident with Talon. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that here. If you want to find out more about it, you can go up to the corner and check out the Mercy Lore video. Moving on, the 2 spent Christmas together hiding out in Egypt. The 2 would make a deal with each other. Anna had seen that Morrison was tracking Reaper's movements and Anna wanted Hakim gone. Jack would help capture Hakim. In return, they'd both go after Reaper. Within a week, they had rounded up a number of Hakim's associates, whittling away at his organization. Eventually, Hakim would go underground, which turned their hunting game into one of waiting. On a stakeout, they eventually caught sight of Hakim, at which point Anna would take out a new mask, not one of Shrike, but one of Bastet, and explain to Jack that his Soldier 76 personality had inspired her to be less of a bounty hunter and more of a protector. A week later, Hakim had been caught, and his organization was dismantled. Anna's new actions as Bastet had caught the attention of the Egyptian public and eventually the government. At the necropolis, Anna would stay until she found a caretaker for the place, as well as leaving most of the items she'd collected behind. The 2 left the necropolis, and Anna carried on with her Bastet mask. After some time down the line, Anna would send a letter to Cole Cassidy, simply stating, "Charmer, it's time to talk," followed by her coordinates. Anna knew that Cassidy had survived the fall of Overwatch and had returned as a gunslinger for hire. She also knew that a return to Overwatch would need new blood, having already intercepted Winston's recall. Still unsure about wanting to rejoin, she decided she'd help them out from the shadows, and worried that a return of the old guard for Overwatch would poison Overwatch's return. Cassidy would arrive in Cairo and find Anna in a restaurant. and revealed that he knew that she was one who'd sent the letter. They would talk all night long, reliving old times, before the subject of Winston's recall would come to topic. Cassidy was unsure of whether or not he would return to Overwatch. Anna, however, explained that Talon was hunting ex-Overwatch agents, and that it had attacked Watchpoint Gibraltar. Anna had the opinion that it was time for her generation to move on, and that Overwatch needed new, younger blood. Cassidy suggested that Overwatch would need leaders like Anna, but Anna would grimly ask if he wanted to relive that past. She revealed to Cassidy that she wanted to talk to him here instead of online, as she wanted to see his face, perhaps for the last time. The reunion was cut short as they were attacked by Talon soldiers. They fought their way through the market in Cairo, and Cassidy noticed that Anna was knocking out troopers rather than killing them, which was odd for a woman who had, previously never left any enemy alive. Anna commented that a lot had changed over the years, and that she'd done more than enough killing. Anna took Cassidy to one of her hideouts and gave him a USB containing data on the threats she'd been monitoring, along with a number of individuals she'd been tracking. Anna's Song, Alexandra Zaranova, and her own daughter, Fariha Amari, each of them fighting their own battles, and she wanted Cassidy to find them and bring them to Overwatch. Cassidy would comment that if he did this, he'd be leaving behind what Overwatch was, what he was. Smiling, Anna would tell him that that was a good thing. Agreeing to the mission, Cassidy took the USB and headed off to track the people. Cassidy first tracked down Fariha and brought her to see her mother. This was an awkward reunion. Anna had mentioned the letter she had written to Fariha, but Fariha said that if Anna had anything to say, she could say it directly. The reunion was interrupted by a Talon ambush. Fariha took to the sky, while Cassidy and Anna fled on the ground. Anna ordered that Fariha lure the attackers out into the open, of which Cassidy was unsure. But Fariha recognised her mother's plan. More of Talon forces would come, and they could wipe out the cell in a single strike. It worked to a point, as Farah was able to unleash a rocket barrage that wiped out all of their attackers. Not before being wounded herself, though. Anna would rush over to her daughter and attend to her wounds, despite Fariha's protests. She had explained the regrets of the lives Anna had taken, and how she refused to kill anymore. But out of all her regrets, the greatest was steering her daughter away from Overwatch. Fariha told her that she couldn't take it back, to which Anna agreed. But perhaps Anna could set things right now. She told Fariha that the world had suffered for her mistakes, and that the world needed heroes again. Fariha needed to join a team that could help her reach her full potential. She wouldn't be able to find that with Helix, but she could with Cassidy and Overwatch. Farah had refused, preferring to stay with Helix, at least for now. She gave her mother a final goodbye, and whispered, "It's good to see you again. I wasn't sure I'd ever get the chance." After that, she would fly off. Cassidy had told Anna that their cover was blown, given the carnage they had just unleashed, and asked if she needed help getting settled. Anna was barely listening. She just watched her daughter fly off into the night sky, where Cassidy would realise Anna would be okay. When she asked him where he'd head next, he responded that he had his eye on someone up north, and the two went their separate ways. After the reunion with her daughter was complete, Anna met back up with Morrison, where they would travel the globe hunting Talon agents. But while they were hunting Talon agents, Talon were hunting them. During their hunt, Morrison received word from an informant that promised to prove the quality of their intel. To this end, they entered Zurich. While not the first time they visited this city, they'd arrived at this time to find it devastated by Null Sector, which had attacked the city a week prior. Anna saw a red-haired woman in the streets below, surrounded by warbots. From this vantage point, she would dispatch of all of them, and the woman fled into the night. Morrison assured that woman would be fine. While still a little off about the nature of his informant, Morrison told Anna that according to the informant's intel, Talon was going to carry out an assassination on this night. When Anna pressed him on more information, Morrison stated that he wasn't given a name, but that they left it somewhere for them to find out. Anna was suspect that this meant a trap, and refused to take another step until Morrison told her where they were going. Morrison explained that the intel couldn't risk being tracked, so they left it at a drop point. The two would arrive at a mausoleum that had the encrypted data. Morrison would then search for the drive, while Anna remained on Overwatch, where she would see a squadron of Null Sector bots enclosing on their area. The two would take out the attacking warbots, but Morrison was wounded. It's like every situation these two get into, they get wounded, and it's kind of crazy. Sorry, not they get wounded, Jack gets wounded. Anna would inject him with nanobiotics and wait for Morrison to heal. He revealed that the data drive had given them an address and time. Anna was still wary, but Morrison pointed out that they trusted this source up to this point, and at least he wanted to stop the hit from occurring. By the time they arrived at their destination, the sun had long set. They entered the suburbs, where no sector had yet to reach, though there was a shelter in place for keeping civilians off the streets. Anna still suspected that Morrison was keeping something from her. He ordered her to take an vantage point while he scouted the streets below. He pinpointed a glass house where the target apparently resided. From her vantage point, however, Anna could see a woman and a child within the room, where she would see Talon troopers in the yard. Also, she would order Morrison to get inside fast while she kept him informed to the troops' advancements. Eventually, Anna was forced to open fire herself as the situation escalated. Eventually, she would realize that the woman in the house was Mirembe. With around 20 Talon troops still active, Anna was forced to enter the house and reunited with Mirembe. And now the 3 former Overwatch agents worked closely together to clear out the Talon operatives, and eventually Mirembe was reunited with her son, who she had placed in a panic room. Local authorities were alerted, and Jack and Anna led Mirembe out of her house. As Mirembe and her son were left to a security detail, Anna realised she knew more than she was letting on. That she'd sussed out that Anna and Morrison were working with an intelligence that allowed them to be at the right place at the right time. After Mirembe's departure, Anna would ask Morrison to come clean, as she knew there was still information he was withholding. He told her that the data on a drive gave the user a secure backdoor to Talon's back files. He'd asked for proof, and Mirembe was the first on the list. He explained that due to Talon's attack on Watchpoint Gibraltar, the organization had a nearly complete list of Overwatch agents, and had been carrying out assassinations ever since. While Anna was aware of this rumor, Morrison's words confirmed it. Anna would suggest that the two would join forces with Winston and his recall of Overwatch, but Morrison would refuse, explaining that it would arouse further suspicion if they joined a large organization. She ordered Morrison to give her the drive, in which Morrison would oblige, allowing her to download the data pertaining to Overwatch members on Talon's hit list. She would give the drive back to him, and the two departed on their separate paths, as Morrison would continue his war against Talon. In the silence of the night, Anna would reflect that the world would always need saving. She would then set out to protect the people on Talon's hit list, to protect them from afar. Later on, Anna would attend the Overwatch Christmas party alongside her husband Sam, and then would eventually rejoin Overwatch officially, where she would be present on Talon's next attack on Watchpoint Gibraltar.
We are compassion.
Welcome back to the channel. Now today I want to take out a character that is loved by so many in the Overwatch community. Loved and hated also by a lot of people. But a character I personally like. A character who has played such a vital role in making Overwatch the force it is today. Before we get into it though, consider checking out the lore playlist. It'll be getting updated every week with lore about all your favourite Overwatch characters, important key events in the Overwatch universe, and much more. So ladies and gentlemen, sit back, grab a snack, and let's take a look at Overwatch's guardian angel, Angela Ziegler. Angela Ziegler grew up during the Omnic crisis. Born in Switzerland, she lived with her 2 parents. The last day she saw her parents alive were when they left to volunteer at the local hospital to deal with consequences the Omnic crisis brought upon them. While they were gone and Ziegler was at home, they were both killed in an airstrike. Later that day, the police would show up to her house and tell her this devastating news. People all around her assured that her pain would lessen over time, but in reality, this pain would return at the slightest reminder. Despite this devastating tragedy though, Angela was consumed not by a thirst for revenge, but a desire to aid people and advocate for peace. As a teenager, she was established as a medical prodigy. While she was still studying, 14-year-old Ziegler visited Torbjorn in the hospital after the loss of his arm in Operation White Dome. While she was still a student in university, she would visit the Overwatch base and once posed for a photo with Torbjorn as well as other Overwatch members. She would go on to obtain an MD and a PhD in Switzerland, and eventually rose to become the head of surgery at a prominent Swiss hospital, before pioneering a breakthrough in the field of applied nanobiology. This breakthrough would radically improve the treatment of life-threatening illnesses and injuries. It was this breakthrough that would attract the attention of the organization Overwatch. She would personally meet with Commander Jack Morrison at Overwatch's HQ. He was thoroughly impressed with a paper she'd written on nanobiotic healing, and she believed that it had the potential to completely revolutionize the way that medical care was given, not just in the examination room, but throughout the entire structure of the medical profession. She believed that Overwatch would give her the opportunity to quickly get her ideas out into the field to help more people. Morrison would offer for Ziegler to become the head of Overwatch's medical research. On one hand, Ziegler was greatly tempted by the offer, but she also told Morrison that she had her reservations, that she wanted to focus on the civilian and peacetime applications of her work. She didn't want to create new ways for Overwatch commanders to send soldiers into danger. Morrison was cordial in his response, and stated that if she joined Overwatch, she wouldn't have to worry about grants or haggle for new equipment. Whatever Ziegler needed, she would get. Ziegler, with a big smile on her face, would then agree to join Overwatch. Because her parents had been taken by war, Ziegler was opposed to the organization's militaristic approach to keeping global peace. She would ultimately recognize that Overwatch offered her the opportunity to save lives on a much larger scale. Due to her being Overwatch's head of medical research, Angela sought to leverage her work for healing in frontline crises. The response to this was the Valkyrie Swift Response Suit, which Ziegler herself piloted on many Overwatch missions. She became Overwatch's most prominent combat medic. However, this was a point of contention for her. The Valkyrie suit had been created to prove her technology worked, but her teammates wanted her to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. To this she would acquiesce. This marked the beginning of her Mercy persona, while Dr. Angela Ziegler faded into the background. At some point, she would assist an Overwatch team in helping people in Venezuela in an aftermath of a massive storm. Despite her contributions to Overwatch, she was often at odds with her superiors and the organization's overarching aims. Despite Morrison's word that her research would not be misused, Angela sometimes found herself at odds with the commander and felt the technology she developed was being exploited and weaponized for war. One example was the development of a biotic rifle by Torbjorn. Torbjorn provided assurances that the device was only intended for healing, but Ziegler would maintain that this was setting Overwatch down a road that could lead to the weaponization of biotic technology, something she did not want, and that she had only conducted research in the field of the condition that it would not be used for offensive purposes. She also had some concerns regarding Blackwatch, some specific concerns relating to Gabriel Reyes, as well as his medical support, Moira O'Dearan. 10 years before the present day, Angela would be the one to treat Gerard Lacroix for his injuries he received after surviving a Talon attack on a Blackwatch facility. She would happily report to Reyes and Cassidy that he would make a full recovery. 9 years before the present day, Angela would be involved in a mission to King's Row to end an uprising by Null Sector. This mission was unsanctioned, although it was authorized by Strike Commander Jack Morrison. That same day, Ziegler would argue with Morrison over Overwatch's inability to intervene in the conflict due to the English Prime Minister specifically stating that any Overwatch activity within the area was forbidden. Ziegler would express her concern for the thousands in the city who needed medical aid, and stood by the fact that Overwatch was made to help people, not sit on the sidelines. After the mission was authorized, Ziegler would welcome Cadet Lena Oxton to the team. She would comment on how her inspirational words would convince Jack to authorize the mission, and how he was very invested in her career, and that Jack had asked Angela to keep an eye on her. Ziegler would then tell Oxen that she could call on her if she ever needed any help. Moving on to 8 years before the present day, Angela would take part in an operation in Havana on a strike team with Winston, Tracer and Genji. This team would be under the command of Sojourn, and their mission was to extract Maximilian, a very wealthy Omnic who had contacts with Talon. As Talon forces were moving through the city, Tracer would engage the convoy escorting Maximilian. Mercy's part in stopping this convoy would consist of her swooping over it and blinding the drivers using her Valkyrie suit. Fighting their way throughout the city, they would eventually apprehend Maximilian, who suggests they could make a deal in return for his freedom. Mercy would state that he was in no position to negotiate and that they already knew who his associates were. However, Maximilian would ask Overwatch what they were in the market for, and Mercy would state they're in the market for an introduction.
Surely we can make some kind of deal.
You are in no position to negotiate.
You're coming with us.
We know all about you and your associates.
Oh, I have many associates. Perhaps it's not clear what I have to offer. My resources are quite substantial. Let me ask, what might you be in the market for?
An introduction.
Ah, and who is it you would like to meet?
My friend, the world doesn't understand visionaries like us. I respect what you are trying to accomplish. You fight for your kind. It's noble and doomed to fail. But with Talon's help, that can change.
You have my attention.
A deal would be struck between Maximilian and Overwatch, and he would tell the strike team where Doomfist would be in 3 weeks. Damn, this Maximilian, he really likes selling Doomfist out, doesn't he? Moving on forward into Overwatch's final days, Ziegler would be interrogated by the United Nations. She would admit that the outcome between Jack Morrison and Gabriel Reyes was inevitable, them two supposedly dying in a fight that broke out in Overwatch HQ. She would say that they had drifted further and further apart ever since Morrison was chosen over Reyes for the position of Strike Commander, and that despite her efforts, that rift only grew wider. Ziegler would eventually leave Overwatch due to being conflicted with the organization's militaristic methods. When Overwatch dissolved, Ziegler sought distance from the agency and rededicated herself to helping those affected by war, caring for the broken and disposed in crisis areas all around the world. Despite spending most of her efforts and time caring for those who were broken and disposed, Dr. Ziegler could be counted on to don her Valkyrie suit whenever innocents were in peril, hoping that she could make a more peaceful world. However, due to the fallout of Overwatch and the disgrace of the organization, it would damage her professional reputation, and she would go by her real name rather than Mercy during this period. She would continue to work in medical facilities, but with less advanced technology than what she had when she was with Overwatch. Some locations would include Poland, Venezuela, South Korea, and Egypt. Speaking of Egypt, she would work in an aid camp on the outskirts of Cairo for 2 years. She would hold Overwatch responsible for much of this country's suffering and wanted to help fix it. However, the people here would only tell her to go home. You've done enough damage. Nevertheless though, she would remain in the country and work as a doctor, reminding herself that she hadn't become a doctor to be thanked, that she had become a doctor to save people's lives. She would have applied to work at a proper hospital, but she would say that being a prominent ex-Overwatch official isn't the sort of experience on a CV that people are looking for. Later on, when Winston would issue his recall of Overwatch agents, Angela was in the Middle East, performing triage in a makeshift tent clinic. She was unsure if Overwatch should be restored. She wondered that if Overwatch was brought back, would it continue to be like it was? She thought that in doing so, they'd only lead to the disaster they had done in the past. She knew Winston's heart was in the right place, but that didn't mean he was right. Later on, Ziegler would be reunified with Jack Morrison and Anna Amari as they crashed into her apartment. Morrison had been wounded by Reaper and said that all he needed was a few medkits. Ziegler couldn't help but feel some irritation with Anna, as she was using a biotic rifle, an adaptation of Ziegler's technology that had been made without her approval. She was happy that the both of them were alive, of course, but both of them were a manifestation of a past she wanted to escape from. They would ask her why she was in Egypt, and why was she working here and not in a proper hospital, but Ziegler would avoid both questions. Nevertheless, Morrison stated that he was hunting the truth about what happened to Overwatch, and seeing Ziegler's skepticism, asked if he should answer Winston's recall order. She would tell him that vengeance would achieve nothing, but Jack being Jack would scoff at this statement. Later on that night, Ziegler would fall asleep, but would be awoken by an explosion. Morrison and Anna told her that someone had attacked the Temple of Anubis and that they had to go. Ziegler protested that Helix security would handle it, but Morrison pointed out that the attackers were Talon. Ziegler would acquiesce and join them, donning her Valkyrie suit. As she flew over Cairo toward the temple, she would see a firefight between Helix and Talon. Morrison and Anna would go after Reaper, despite her protests that people would be caught in the crossfire. Flying down into the smoke, she found a young girl named Hanan. pinned under rubble. She would heal the girl's injuries using her Kudasea's staff and reassure the girl that she would fly her to safety. However, Hanan said that they needed to save her brother as well, who was still trapped in a collapsed building. The pair descended into the structure and managed to find Hanan's brother. The three ran as the building collapsed all around them, and as it did, Ziegler used her body to shield Hanan's brother, which would cause Ziegler to lose consciousness. Sometime later, she would regain this consciousness, finding Morrison above her. Anna told her that she had Hanan and they got out of the building. The following day, a flurry of activity as Ziegler and Cairo's medical services treated the injured. By the end of the day, she was exhausted and was only still awake thanks to coffee. At the aid camp, Anna and Morrison came to see her. Morrison told her that Reaper was still alive and that they intend on following him to Europe. Anna asked Angela to come with them, that they could use her, someone with expertise in the medical field like she had, but she would refuse. Anna and Ziegler parted on good terms, accepting that they were following different paths in life. She reflected how she stood at their graves when they were presumed dead. This time, she doubted she'd see them again. A while later, Ziegler discussed things with Mahmoud, a co-worker in the camp. He would tell her that Hanan's parents were dead and that they were looking for the children's next of kin. Watching Hanan and her brother, Ziegler reflected how recent events had awoken a sense of heroism in her, feelings that she doubted would ever return. She would watch Hanan in one of the aid tents and reflect that her battle wasn't over. Some point after the firefight in Cairo, Ziegler would leave the city. She would leave the city to join back with Overwatch. So when Null Sector attacked Paris, she would join up with former Overwatch members who would also converge on the city to battle the attacking Omnics. Descending from the sky in her trademark fashion, she would heal Mei, who had been previously injured, and together they were able to defeat the enemy. After this, Winston declared that Overwatch was indeed back, knowing that Null Sector wouldn't just stop here and that the fight isn't over. Now Ziegler has rejoined Overwatch. Following this battle in Paris, all Overwatch members will return to Watchpoint Gibraltar, which they were going to use as their base of operations. This is when they would discover that Paris was just the beginning of Null Sector's war against the world, and they weren't the only enemy Overwatch had to deal with. Winston would declare that they would fight through one city at a time, and Ziegler would go on missions in Route 66 and Toronto.
My friends, when I was born, I was overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by the sudden rush of senses, emotions, choices. I was excited, alive. It was frightening. But I found in facing fear, there is freedom. And through freedom, you can find your own path. I have chosen to share the discovery with you. A new beginning. I wish I could stay. You have this one life. Choose well.
You have this one life.
Choose well.
Choose well.
Today I want to talk about one of the most pivotal characters in the Overwatch universe. A character who would change the course of Overwatch's story forever. Welcome back to the channel, my name is al-g-man, and today I want to do a deep dive into the lore of a character who will be very relevant in an upcoming video. Before we get to that video, I want to talk to you about the first sentient Omnic, Aurora. To start us off, Aurora was created by a team of Omnica Corp researchers led by Dr. Mina Liao. Aurora would be the most advanced AI that the team had ever created, an AI that was capable of human-level cognition and beyond. Omnica was deeply devoted to creating Aurora, and Liao herself was aware of the risks she was taking creating such an advanced AI. She was pushing the limits of what many thought was impossible. And when it came to the moment of Aurora's activation, even the development team were unsure as to what could happen. It would be soon after Aurora was activated that she would learn that she was truly one of a kind. So one of a kind that Aurora was truly alone in her existence. It'd be soon after Liao and her team would soon realize that Aurora was sentient, truly alive, which was not something the team had been aiming for. Some members of the team were shocked and were unable to believe that they'd created something that was alive, something that could think and feel for itself. But Aurora would pass every test given to her, proving that the Omnic was truly sentient. She would regard Liao as her mother and would model aspects of her own presentation on her. This would include identifying herself as female. Now, what exactly caused Aurora's sentience was a mystery even to Liao, and Liao would spend the rest of her life trying to uncover and replicate it. She would later theorize that it had been triggered by a subatomic particle traveling through a circuit at exactly the right moment during its passage through Earth's atmosphere. It was a 1 in a billion event, and one that could never be replicated. It was due to Aurora's sentience that she could not be monetized, and not long afterwards, the world became aware of Aurora's existence. In what Matthias Verne would later describe as career suicide, Liao campaigned to give her creation legal personhood and would eventually win in an American court. Now, this decision was a controversial one, and the United Nations placed limits on further AI development. Furthermore, Aurora's birth inadvertently led to Omnica's death. Not only could her model not be mass-produced, but her creation led to the Omnica being subjected to a level of scrutiny it wasn't able to withstand, which would lead to the company shutting down. Aurora was now born into a world that she didn't understand, and wanted to see and understand more of it. So Aurora would go on a pilgrimage of self-discovery in India. She wanted to learn about the world and its people, to understand what made humans, well, human. Suravasa was her first stop, where she was accepted as she was, without judgment. She would continue her journey, growing with each place she visited. Having observed humanity, Aurora began questioning her own existence, about her soul. With no one able to provide her answers, Aurora would set off into the Himalayas alone. She would travel to where the Shambhali monastery would one day be built. When the Omnic crisis occurred, all functioning Omnics were controlled by the God program Anubis, while drone-type units were mass-produced from Omniums. However, due to Aurora having sentience, she would escape Anubis's control. Her intelligence was not subject to outside programming, and Liao was able to track down Aurora's exact location. Realizing that Aurora was not under Anubis's control, she theorized that if there were a way to share Aurora's intelligence with her fellow Omnics, it could override Anubis's programming and turn the tides of the war. While the cause of Aurora's sentience escaped even Liao, she would theorize that the components required from it would have to exist in other Omnic models and even some of Anubis's own creations. At this time, Aurora was living in a secluded temple in Nepal, far from the horrors of the war and from the judging eyes of humanity. By this point, she had developed into a wise and deeply introspective individual. When Liao would approach her, she would explain to her the idea to give other Omnics sentience, and Aurora was more than happy to aid in this plan. She would lean herself to Liao's research, but after extensive research, the only method that Liao and her team could find meant that Aurora would have to interface with the Omnics all over the world in a manner similar to that employed by Anubis. Essentially, they would be taking Aurora's consciousness and the sentience it carried and would spread it globally in a giant pulse, spreading the quantum event of Aurora's creation 1,000,000 times over. With the Omnics exposed to the hyperfunctionality of Aurora's sentience, it would grant each affected Omnic their own mind to think freely, to be their own person. This would come at a cost. The sheer power that would be required to overload Aurora's mind so severely would mean that she would likely die. Even if by some chance she could be rebuilt, her soul would be forever lost. Liao was determined to find an alternative way, but as the days turned to weeks, as Aurora would watch the casualties rise and rise as the war dragged on, Aurora realized she could do something to stop it. This was compounded by the fact that Omnics, who would be a new people, who would be sentient with Aurora's gift, were dying too. Aurora would take Liao aside and put her doubts to peace. She was willing to save 2 peoples at the cost of her own life. Witnesses would later state that Aurora viewed her duty, however sad, as an honor. Her only request that the procedure take place in the heart of the Himalayas, in the abandoned temple where she had found meaning and purpose. Liao and Aurora would part ways in what would be a teary goodbye. As the procedure took place, Aurora's intelligence would be spread in a global pulse, and for one brief, timeless moment, Aurora's consciousness was projected into every other Omnic on the planet, granting those with the requisite anatomy their own sentience. This moment made all Omnics self-aware and would be known as the Awakening, and for a fraction of a second, all were united in a single consciousness, and all would hear the same message.
My friends, when I was born, I was overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by the sudden rush of senses, emotions, choices. I was excited, alive. It was frightening. But I found in facing fear, there is freedom. And through freedom, you can find your own path. I have chosen to share the discovery with you. A new beginning. I wish I could stay. You have this one life. Choose well.
You have this one life.
Choose well.
Choose well.
The outcome of Aurora's sacrifice would help humanity turn the war. Of the Omnics that became sentient, some would throw down their weapons, some would join with humanity, and some would continue their fight for Anubis. Some Omnics would see Aurora's gift as more of a curse, and would fight to be free of self-awareness. Despite this, months later the war would be over, and Anubis would be defeated. Many Omnics would consider Aurora to be their mother, and as I said previously, her gift of sentience would be called the Awakening. The Shambali would worship Aurora, but not as a deity. They strive to reach the place Aurora ascended to. That level of being, they would call the Iris. The Iris itself is an anomaly that formed as a result of Aurora's awakening pulse, apparently at the very site of Aurora's sacrifice. Now, while the details of Aurora's final moments remain vague even now, the Shambali state that Aurora would transcend existence itself. However, there would only be a handful of people that were in her physical presence when her transcendence occurred, and the details became less clear over time. Aurora is worshipped all over the world by many. At the temple in Suravasa, there was a statue to the first Omnic who saved many with her own life. Now, Aurora is one of the most pivotal characters in the Overwatch story, with her being the reason all other Omnics have gained sentience. Without Aurora, we would have no Ramatra. Without Aurora, we'd have no Bastion. and we'd have no Zenyatta. I wanted to talk about Aurora today because I wanted to let people know of her character before we truly dive in to talking about the Omnic crisis as a whole. I feel like there's a lot of people either coming back to Overwatch after years of being gone, or a lot of new players getting into the game ever since the spotlight. So I feel that if you are interested in the Overwatch lore, it's important you know who Aurora is and the significance she played in the story. I personally love the idea of Aurora's character. The first Omnic to be sentient, sacrificing herself so that all others can share her gift.
Well, that's a fine how do you do. What was it you think got us the boot? Stealing the Queen's cash? Blowing up her summer sack? The beatdown at the bar? Whatever it was, you really ticked off the big boss this time. I don't think they're gonna let us back in.
Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. Today I bring you yet another lore video on Overwatch, focusing in on two very beloved characters. Now the reason I have decided to go over two characters in this video instead of one is because their stories mainly line up with each other. And those characters are Junkrat and Roadhog. So get cozy, grab a snack, because today we're gonna look at everyone's two favorite Junkers. To start us off, let's take a look at Junkrat. So during the Omnic crisis, there was an attack on the Australian Omnium's fusion core, which forever altered the landscape of the Outback. After the detonation, the area was transformed into a harsh, irradiated wasteland, littered with debris and twisted fragments of the ruined facility, and the area became uninhabitable to most. But there were those who survived. Taking on the name for themselves as the Junkers, they scavenged the husk of the Omnium and formed a lawless, cutthroat society in its shadow. Among them was Junkrat, also known as Jameson Fox. Like many others, he was affected by the lingering radiation, which gave him a small touch of madness. It was this madness that made him ideal for handling dangerous explosives, a love which he turned into an obsession. During the change in Junkertown's throne, Junkrat was present for the reckoning that saw Odessa Stone challenge King Mason Hell. Stone was a wastelander, and Junkrat booed her along with much of the crowd. Made worse was the fact that with the activation of Scrapyard's magnet, he lost his bucket of popcorn. But despite being outnumbered, Odessa succeeded in defeating Hell. And in the aftermath of this battle, among a silent, shocked audience, Junkrat would let out a cheer, yelling Junker Queen.
Only 13 years ago. Get out of my city.
Yeah! Junker Queen!
Well, that turned out alright, didn't it? But now they're probably wondering what sort of changes I'll make around here. Well, buckler, they're about to find out.
Junkrat also became a fan of Wrecking Ball, a mysterious mech who won numerous matches within the scrapyard. His favourite match was where Wrecking Ball defeated 3-arm Luke. Later down the line, Junkrat came to notoriety when he discovered an extremely valuable secret in the bones of the Omnium. Though few knew the nature of what he found, he ran his mouth constantly, alluding to his discovery, and as a result, he was pursued by bounty hunters, gangs, and opportunists everywhere he went. He was cornered in a Junkertown bar by enforcers from the Queen of Junkertown herself. He blabbed on and on about his treasure, that she'd come to suspect that he was hiding something. Junkrat, desperate to get out of his situation, loudly announced that he'd share the location of the treasure for a 10% share. He hoped that the man drinking at the bar would take him up on his offer, but he didn't respond, causing Junkrat to raise the offer to 25%. The man, whose name was Roadhog, came to Junkrat's aid, and more as an excuse to pummel the Queen's enforcers rather than aiding Junkrat himself. Roadhog grudgingly agreed to be Junkrat's personal bodyguard in exchange for a 50-50 share of the spoils. Junkrat tried to haggle him down, even going as high as 28%, but eventually relented at a 50% cut. Now, we move on to Roadhog. So, Roadhog's story actually begins a bit before the destruction of this Omnium. The Australian Omnium was gifted to Omnics after the Omnic Crisis. You know, these same Omnics that nearly destroyed the entire country, in the hopes to establish a long-term peace accord. This arrangement permanently displaced Mako Rootledge and a large number of outback residents, a scattered collection of survivalists, solar farmers, and people who just wanted to be left alone. Frustrated over the loss of their homes, Mako and others turned to violent rebellion. They formed the Australian Liberation Front and struck against the Omnium and its robot population to take back the lands that had been stolen. This conflict would continue to escalate until the rebels sabotaged the Omnium's fusion core, resulting in an explosion that destroyed the facility, irradiated the region, and littered the outback with twisted metal and wreckage for kilometers around. Mako watched as his home became an apocalyptic wasteland, and he himself was forever changed. Adapting to this environment, he would don a mask and took to the broken highways of the outback on his ramshackle chopper. Little by little, his humanity was forgotten, and the last parts of Mako faded away, and the ruthless killer Roadhog was born. He continued to dwell in his farm, which was located on the outskirts of Junkrat town. Roadhog was also there when Odessa Stone was crowned Junkrat Queen after defeating King Mason Howell. He would remain silent the entire time, though one loudmouth caught his attention as he yelled out Junkrat Queen, inadvertently giving Stone the nickname she'd bear for years to come. Roadhog, for a long time, remained a thorn in the side of the Junkrat Queen. He didn't care. He was there for gas, and everyone else could rot for all he cared. While he was an enemy of the Queen, he was still permitted to be inside Junkrat town as long as he took no weapons in. One night, Roadhog would find some Junkers attempting to loot his farm. He hooked one of them, but the Junker told him he was very sorry and Roadhog could take all of their scrap and weapons in exchange for their lives. Roadhog would accept, stating that the world deserved them and that they could scrap every panel around and still wouldn't get a mile to a real city. He headed to Junkrat town, and after some thinking how he hated it there and how the Queen and the Junkers deserve what they get, went to a Junker named Bruce. He gave Bruce a scrap and weapons from the looters in exchange for some hydrogen canisters. Bruce also told Roadhog, "The world wants to forget blokes like us, Mako. Wants us to stay quiet. Don't give him the satisfaction." Afterwards, he headed to a bar and silently bought a beer with the leftover coins from the looters. While there, he overheard some Junkers confronting Junkrat about what treasure he'd found, and also overheard him say he'd offer a friend he could trust a 10% share. Junkrat pointed at Roadhog as he said these words. Roadhog ignored them at first, while some Junkers told him to stay out of it. Junkrat offered higher percentage shares, while an unnamed Junker told Roadhog to sit where he was. Then, Roadhog would incapacitate the Junkers threatening Junkrat and demand a 50% share of Junkrat's treasure, and after some haggling, Junkrat relented and settled on 50%. He thought about Junkrat as the two walked away. This idiot, he's a liar, lies to himself most of all, but he's not the quiet type. The world deserves him, deserves both of us, and we'll make sure they don't forget it. Now, Junkrat and Roadhog are officially partners in crime. I felt weird saying that. Anyway, for some reason, Junkrat and Roadhog were kicked out of Junkrat town, following a string of incidents that included stealing the Queen's money, blowing up her summer shack, and
Beat down at the bar?
whatever the reason, Junkrat blamed Roadhog for it. Still, as Junkrat was aware, there were two things that solved every problem.
There's two things that solve every problem. Money and explosives. I've got an idea!
Having now gotten an idea, the pair wandered the irradiated Australian outback, and Junkrat was Roadhog's only associate, to the puzzlement of many. They left the outback and embarked upon an international crime spree, leaving nothing but havoc and bedlam in their wake. They were responsible for a string of robberies, arson, murder, and other crimes stretching from Sydney to Kings Row. They had a creed of no job too big, no score too small. It is known that they performed a heist on the Banco de Dorado by digging a tunnel, while in the United Kingdom, they stole the crown jewels. This spree of mayhem and chaos caused untold millions in property damage all around the world. You kind of gotta rate it though, like, this is some dedication. Like, these two, like, how can you hate this? You could respect the hustle, you know what I'm saying? British, French, and Latin American authorities offered rewards for information on the fugitives and theorized that they were intent on crossing the Atlantic to North America. Their activities were reported on by A Moment in Crime.
Tonight, on A Moment in Crime, there's spree of mayhem and chaos has caused untold millions in property damage around the world. But who are these two deranged junkers, and what inspired their orgy of destruction? Is this the work of master criminals, or just a couple of idiots?
By which point the bounty on their heads had reached 25 million. At some point during their escapades, Roadhog and Junkrat were offered a job by a suit from Hyde Global. This suit claimed that a factory of his in downtown Sydney had been attacked by Omnic terrorists, with his workers taken hostage. The suit told the pair that he wanted to keep the police out of it, and there was no one better for the job, especially at keeping things quiet. So Roadhog and Junkrat would accept the job and made their way to the factory. Their quiet approach consisted of detonating explosives on the roof and entering the factory in force. They blasted their way through the factory's robots, exited, and brought the whole structure down. As Roadhog reminded Junkrat, they were meant to be hostages, except there were none. And the robots they destroyed weren't Omnics, but cop bots. At this point, the actual police arrived, but the two made their escape. Upon realizing they'd been set up, our two lovable criminals would head back to see their corpo friend. Man, fucking corpse. You know? Fucking corpse. I've seen corpse strip farmers of water, and eventually of land. Saw them transport Night City into a machine fueled by people's cries. They strung him up on a crane and headed off, leaving the suit to die in an explosion that consumed the entire Hyde Global building. Which, you know, like aura points for them. You know, like, this is seriously like aura points. With their worldwide heist complete, Junkrat and Roadhog returned to Junkertown with a hover trolley loaded with gold and explosives. At the town gates, Junkrat laid out his plan. Light the fuse, put on the inconspicuous disguises, sneak into town, get the trolley to the Queen's throne, reveal their deception, and kaboom! Roadhog had Junkrat refine the plan so that it included them escaping the detonation and escaping with the gold at that.
So you don't screw it all up. Alright, first, we light the fuse. Then, we put on our inconspicuous disguises and sneak into town. After that, we get our glorious blinged out boom trolley right up to the boss's place, reveal our ingenious deception, and boom! They'll never see it coming! Oh, right! We need an escape plan. Take two. Light the fuse, inconspicuous, sneaking through town, front door, reveal our deception, then run like hell and boom! It's foolproof. Right! The gold! No point in blowing it up, so... Use inconspicuous trolley, front door, reveal, grab the gold! And... boom?
The plan was set in motion, only to be screwed up as Junkrat revealed their identities to the gate warden. In response, the gates were barred shut, leaving the pair with a trolley of gold, useless disguises, and a ticking fuse. Breaking his silence, Roadhog would utter one single word.
Idiot.
And then at Christmas, Roadhog and Junkrat played volleyball against each other as the Queen watched on while Hammond rode on the ball. And that, my friends, is all we have now of Junkrat and Roadhog. A bit more of a unserious tone to this lore video, as I feel like it's appropriate. Junkrat and Roadhog are honestly lovable. I actually don't know how anyone can hate them. Roadhog is oddly cute at times. He's funny. Junkrat is just, he's lovable also. Cute, funny, and they make a great pair. Honestly, some of the best written crime duos in fiction, I would say. Crime duos in fiction, yeah, because they're both really fun and cool, and they've got aura. As much as you might hate them, they have aura. Welcome back to the channel. Now today we're going to be going over the newest Overwatch story called The Fall of a Sparrow. Now this story is going to go over Genji, Kiriko, and Hanzo, so without further delay, let's go ahead and jump right into it. The story starts off telling us a little bit about the Shimada clan, that the clan itself was a criminal clan, but protected locals from a rival clan called the Hashimoto, a clan who ruled through violence and trafficked in a more unsavory business. It then goes on to tell us that the clan leader, Sojiro Shimada, was assassinated, and after this, the Shimada clan falls into disarray. Due to Sojiro being assassinated, Hanzo would inherit his father's seat at the head of the clan, but the clan elders didn't really like this. They would push Hanzo aside in order to fill their own pockets, and would use the clan's resources to conduct increasingly risky dealings, such as blackmail, assassinations, and power grabs. But this would catch the attention of Overwatch. As this pressure mounted on the clan, the elders would push Hanzo to straighten his younger brother Genji out. When this wasn't happening, Hanzo was then ordered to kill his younger brother Genji. Unbeknownst to Hanzo, however, Genji survived and was rescued by Overwatch, in which he would then help Overwatch take down the Shimada clan. As time would go on, Hanzo and Genji would have a reunion in which Genji would tell Hanzo to pick a side and would leave Hanzo feeling ashamed and horrified by what he did to his own brother. Since the Shimada clan was no longer a thing, this led a vacuum for the Hashimoto clan to fill and seize power. This would lead to the Hashimoto ordering Asa Yamagami, the Shimada Blade Master and wife of Toshiro, to keep the citizens in line. But the two of them had a daughter named Kiriko who was real close to Hanzo and Genji while she was growing up, and she spent a lot of time in the Shimada castle. Eventually Kiriko grew on to start the Yokai, a rebellious group against the Hashimoto. Hanzo would eventually run into Kiriko and join her, and Genji would go on to join a reunited Overwatch. And now Genji returns to Tokyo looking to see if the Hashimoto are in an alliance with Talon. And this is where the story really begins. Genji is back in Tokyo looking to see if the Hashimoto are dealing with Talon. Now Genji is here against Overwatch orders, and eventually he finds a group of 6 Hashimoto goons hanging out on a corner, perhaps waiting for further orders. Genji would watch them for a little while, as he had intentions to follow them to their base. He then had the idea to take them all out, bar one who would escape back to their headquarters so that Genji may follow them. Now he had heard reports that these Yakuza are using weapons very similar to his own, weapons made by Toshiro, and Genji had known that Null Sector had left a mark on the city of Tokyo, but the Hashimoto with these weapons could put an end to any recovery effort. So Genji decides to engage with the 6 Hashimoto goons, and he does so pretty easily, planning on leaving one woman to get out and escape. Then an energy blast fires over his head, and he turns around to see a Hashimoto lieutenant standing behind him. Not with a rifle like he expected though, holding a katana very similar to Genji's own blade. As quickly as he appeared, the lieutenant begins to flee, and Genji takes up the pursuit. Genji tracks him on the rooftops, all the while evading crackling energy blasts anytime he got too close. This lieutenant ends up scoring a lucky shot on Genji, but his armor manages to absorb most of it. The Hashimoto lieutenant then enters into an abandoned arcade where Genji thinks to himself that now he's in his territory. Genji knew this building well, the abandoned arcade where he had spent most of his youth growing up. Genji would creep through the dark between all the game cabinets, but suddenly all of the screens would light up and he would hear the words, "The storm's coming, ready, 3, 2, 1. Go." This is where we enter a little flashback. Genji is playing a game and he is close to beating his high score. Not before a shadow would loom over from behind him. It was his brother Hanzo. Hanzo questions Genji about losing something, referring to Kiriko, who Hanzo had found outside by herself. Genji got so entranced in his game that he completely forgot about keeping an eye on Kiriko. The two would then share an interaction talking about Kiriko, and then moving on to why Hanzo was here. Hanzo is telling Genji that an emergency meeting is being held at the clan, and their father orders them to be there, with Hanzo telling Genji it wouldn't look good if the two of them didn't show up. The two go back and forth about not going, and eventually they end up running late back to the castle, missing the meeting entirely, and their father Sojiro is not happy in the slightest. As they arrive at the castle, they can hear their father shouting. They bring Kiriko back to her mother, and then enter their father's office. Sojiro will tell them the clan leaders had called for a meeting, and they wondered why Sojiro's sons could not be bothered to attend, that they made him look like a fool. Genji would hold his tongue, knowing that a good ninja knew when to become invisible. Hanzo would then go on to take the blame for them not showing up on himself, saying they were at a training exercise where they lost track of time. They also thought about their mother, Rumiko, who had left them years ago. They thought about her calming presence and cool judgment that had tempered their father's anger. They thought about how she was beloved by all the people, a soft heart that inspired loyalty and trust in all that knew her. The next morning, Genji rose at dawn, and the first thing he thought of was that he needed to be somewhere else, anywhere else. As he was sneaking out of the castle, he heard something happening in the dojo. It was Hanzo training. Genji would decide not to interfere as he doesn't want to be pulled into an argument or a training lesson, and ends up leaving the castle. But eventually he notices someone following him. It's Kiriko. Kiriko would tell Genji that when his father is mad at him, his father then gets mad at everyone, and she's not really the biggest fan of it. She would also talk about how she doesn't like it when Genji and Hanzo fight, and also talk about Genji's mother. Then they're surrounded by ninjas, in which Genji would draw his blade. Turns out these are Shimada clan ninjas. Asa Yamagami shows up, Kiriko's mother, as well as Hanzo. Asa ushers Kiriko away, and Hanzo stands beside Genji as they are now being dragged into a training exercise. Asa tells the two that they must work together to overcome this overwhelming force of ninja, and this doesn't end well, as the two basically get the shit beaten out of them. This then leads to an argument between Hanzo and Genji. Hanzo mentions that Genji has considered leaving, with Genji saying that Hanzo and his father want Genji to be something that he isn't, and maybe that it would be better if he were to just leave. There was a pain in Hanzo's eyes, one that Genji didn't think was possible. Hanzo would then bring up that Genji always runs away, and then when Genji does, Hanzo has to take the brunt from his father, mentioning that hard lessons are easier to take with Genji beside him. Hanzo would then heavily sigh and walk away. Genji reflects on this and thinks that he should have been carrying this burden alongside his brother. That evening, Genji would head to Hanzo's room, where it seems like Kiriko had the same idea, who was outside Hanzo's door with a plate of mochi. She smiles when she's seen Genji, but as soon as Genji reached for the door, Kiriko would knock and run away. Genji's first impulse was to run like she did, but as this happened, Hanzo would open the door. Genji, there holding this plate of mochi, says he brought Hanzo some treats and would like to apologize, and that Kiriko doesn't like it when they fight. The two would then make up, and Hanzo would invite Kiriko and Genji into his room. Back in the present now, Genji reflects on how he had walked into a trap, that he is now outnumbered by multiple Hashimoto members. But before Genji could heft his sword, an arrow flew over his shoulder, striking the Hashimoto lieutenant, who was then hit with a volley of arrows. He didn't even have to look to know who it was, but he did anyway. It's his brother Hanzo. Two share a touching moment and embrace, with Kiriko then showing up to hand Genji his sword. Genji was stunned, reunited with his brother once again, and seeing Kiriko after such a long time, who is no longer a child. But then more Hashimoto members began conversing on their position, this time backed with a bit more firepower. They were now joined by soldiers in grey tactical armor. An answer to a question Genji had been asking the entire time he'd been here. Talon was working with the Hashimoto. Three of them begin getting tired, and they state that they're not going to last long like this. Genji brings up the idea of creating a distraction so that Hanzo and Kiriko might get out. Kiriko disagrees, but Genji says that he's here working with Overwatch, and he needs to go to the Hashimoto headquarters. So he gives Kiriko a comms device to link up with Overwatch so they may get Genji's exact position. With Kiriko and Hanzo now able to escape, Genji rushes at all these Hashimoto forces, where eventually Genji is worn out and defeated, and eventually captured by the Hashimoto. Unclear of whether he's been out for days or hours, he is now in a small cell, where he is then brought to an elder of the Hashimoto clan, who speaks in a mechanical robotic voice, where then her interest is piqued to see that a Shimada stands before her. And that's where the comic ends, with Genji being captured by the Hashimoto. Now this is so extremely exciting. It's also kind of shitty to see, I'm not gonna lie. It really does seem that Genji is being heavily nerfed, like not only in game but now in the lore. Like back in the Blackwatch days, we've seen Genji leveling buildings full of people by himself. I know that's a while ago, but it's only the difference of about 10 years. So just kind of suck to see that Genji is getting so nerfed, and he's kind of, but he did have a lot of aura moments in this, and I do love to see Laura and Genji. But this brings me back to the video I made previously before this, theorizing about who the next character is going to be. And my theory is that the next character is going to be Genji and Hanzo's mother, Rumiko, who left the clan years ago. And reading through this short story, it kind of brings that theory up again, where I feel like it's going to be even more now that the next character is going to be Rumiko. Maybe not revealed fully right now, but we do know now that the voice is mechanical and robotic. The silhouette of the next character has horns, so it appears they are wearing a mask, so they probably have some voice modulator on or something like that. And there was a lot of mention of Rumiko in this story, probably more than there would have been if this next character wasn't teased to be Hashimoto related, and the theory that Rumiko is the next character. But this lore drop is very insightful into how things are going on now and into the history of Hanzo, Genji, and Kiriko. It kind of does bring up that issue of Genji and Hanzo being much older than Kiriko, stating that they did share childhood with each other. But at this point, we do get to see that, yes, Kiriko is much younger than Genji and Hanzo. We also get a better look at the relationship between Hanzo and Genji leading up to this assassination attempt by Hanzo. The two actually were getting kind of close, and that makes that betrayal so much more hurtful. But I love to see now that in present day, Kiriko, Hanzo, and Genji have met up once again, and now Hanzo and Kiriko may be stepping foot into joining with Overwatch. Because now Genji is back in Tokyo, Kiriko is now going to link up with Overwatch so that they may rescue Genji from the Hashimoto base, and that might lead to Genji, Hanzo, and Kiriko now becoming a team once again. This is probably my favorite lore drop in recent time, probably going second best, right next to the Ramatra reconciliation with Zenyatta. But I'm so excited to see how this leads up and progresses the story forward. I honestly cannot wait for season 3, and I cannot wait to see if the next character is going to be Rumiko Shimada. I feel like everything is lining up perfectly, and with this character in the story's final words being, "You have my interest now," that there's a Shimada in front of her, I'm really looking forward to see if Rumiko is leading the Hashimoto. At the same time though, there was a lot of stuff in that story to contradict that theory, with Rumiko being told to be this very calm and cool-headed and kind, loving person who inspired loyalty and trust instead of demanding it through violence. But perhaps she wasn't the person everyone thought she was. I don't know. I'm really excited to see where this story goes and how the lore progresses further. I'm very excited to see it, and I'm really hoping it is something big. I'm really hoping this character isn't just a brand new person who's never been mentioned in the story before or anything like that. I'm hoping this is a clan elder from the Hashimoto. I'm hoping it is Genji and Hanzo's mother, because that would be an insane lore reveal. One of the world's most notorious hackers, Sombra has been called the most dangerous operative in the world. But long before she took up the alias Sombra, Olivia Colomar was among the thousands of children left orphaned after the Omnic crisis. With much of Mexico's infrastructure destroyed, she survived by utilizing her abilities in hacking, in which she found out she proved adept at manipulating others for her own personal gain. Eventually, Colomar was taken in by the Los Muertos gang, in which she aided in its self-styled revolution against the Mexican government, performing hacks against them on the gang's behalf. Los Muertos had pretty much believed that rebuilding Mexico only benefited the powerful and wealthy, leaving behind those who were in need of assistance. Commissioner Rivera was one such example, where Sombra would bring him a basket of bread straight to his desk, which gave her access to his personal computer. And it was then she came to the realization that knowledge was power. And so she kept at it, hacking governments, politicians, and corporations. Hell, she was even hacking famous people. Everyone who had any bit of influence, wealth, power were in her domain of inquiry. And over time, this receival of information became an addiction. She needed more. She needed to find out more. And so, her hacking skills would get more dangerous over time. But eventually, Sombra would be caught off guard. She would stumble into a web of a global conspiracy. A conspiracy that also noticed her. With her security compromised and irreparable, Colomar was forced to delete all traces of herself and return into hiding. Now, the conspiracy is something that people have been talking about for a long time, especially now since Emre was added to the game. But that is a topic for another video. Eventually, Sombra would go on to receive many cybernetic enhancements onto her spinal cord and her brain. It was only then would she truly become Sombra. This cybernetic enhancement allowed her to hack anything straight from her fingertips. Determined to find out who was behind the conspiracy, to find out who really runs the world, Sombra would go on to hack even more governments, and organizations, such as Lumerico and Volskaya Industries, and her exploits earned no shortage of admirers, but the one that stood out the most was Talon. Sombra would then go on to join Talon's ranks, and is believed to have contributed to Talon's massive cyber attacks against corporations with strong ties to their governments. Her motivations for joining Talon were unclear, but were apparently self-serving, willing to work alongside Talon to benefit herself. While in Talon, she would meet combat medic Baptiste, and over time the two would become close friends. When Baptiste ended up leaving Talon, Sombra kept a close eye on him, interested in seeing what her old friend was getting up to, and at the same time, she protected this location from Talon. 1 year after the disbandment of Overwatch, Sombra would take place in a mission to take Dr. Sebring the Kuiper from a black site in America. There she would sound an alarm, get the guards' attention, and while the guards did respond, Reaper would take them all out. The mission would eventually end in Dr. Sebring the Kuiper being retrieved. Still working with Talon a little bit later, she would work with Los Muertos again, and it was here she was able to hack the website of Lumerico, posting claims that its CEO, Guillermo Portero, was plundering the riches of Mexico to fill his own purse, and that he had corrupted the government, and that he would not stop until the entire country was under his control. Sombra was able to infiltrate Portero's personal email and use it without Portero knowing about the intrusion. She sent out an email through his own email address, promising to unveil his dirty laundry to the public. And through this, Sombra successfully released a number of documents and put it out there for the entire Mexican public to see, which eventually caught the attention of Mexican authorities and even Atlas News. And this paid off massively for Sombra, as it was revealed that he was using Lumerico's business funds as his own personal piggy bank and was planning on claiming private land by going through the government to build more energy sites for Lumerico. Law enforcement would then eventually go on to categorize the break-ins as criminal action, and Atlas reported on the Sombra Collective mistaking Colomar's identity for a group and not a single person. Sombra claimed that she was only acting in public interest, and her efforts actually incited a revolution in Mexico against Lumerico, and pro-Sombra graffiti showed up all across the world. Less than a week after this leak, Portero stepped down as CEO of Lumerico, but by this time, Sombra had already moved on to her next target, which was Volskaya Industries. Moving on to Volskaya Industries, with the help of Widowmaker and Reaper, Sombra would infiltrate their factory site, looking for its CEO, Katya Volskaya. But Sombra was here for a different reason. You see, they were sent here to actually assassinate Katya Volskaya. But Sombra was here to make a friend. As the mission went on, Sombra would deactivate security alerts and turrets to allow Widowmaker and Reaper to get in their positions. But before Widowmaker could actually follow through with the assassination, Sombra would trigger the alarm, which then ensued a massive gunfight. Sombra, still under the guise that she wanted to assassinate Katya, she would follow her to her secure office, while Reaper engaged a mech on the ground floor. And Widowmaker now locked outside, it was a perfect time for Sombra to get what she wanted. Killing 2 guards inside the office of Katya Volskaya, she then showed Katya that there are pictures of her negotiating with the Omnic enemy to up her own tech. With a threat of exposing this corpo corruption, Sombra managed to blackmail Katya into becoming a friend who she will need every once in a while. Sombra would then tell Reaper and Widowmaker that Katya managed to escape and the mission was failed. But this moves us on to our next part. You see, Katya does not want to be Sombra's friend, so she enlists the help of a Russian soldier named Alexandra Zarinova to track her down. Now, Zarya had the help alongside an Omnic named Lynx 17, and Zarya was able to track Sombra back to Dorado. The two exchanged words and then eventually bullets, but Zarya was able to incapacitate Sombra via a graviton surge. Sombra, however, did warn Zarya that if something were to happen to her, Katya's photos would be revealed all across the world, including her dealings with Omnics. Zarya in turn revealed that she knew Sombra's real name, which briefly fazed the hacker. However, Sombra maintained that she wanted Katya to remain in power, as she wanted her as a source of information. However, the conversation reached its end when Lynx 17 collapsed to the floor, as Sombra had hacked him back in Numbani when they were trying to trace her. Is that a wasp? It's not a wasp. We're good. we're good. Sombra would then reveal that the warehouse they were in would explode in 1 minute, and Zarya left Sombra alive and escaped with Lynx. Moving further on down the line, when Doomfist was rescued from his HCI cell, Sombra would take part in a mission at Casino Monaco, alongside Doomfist and Widowmaker. During this, Sombra would let Doomfist know that a group was entering the casino, and the tip paid off because this group was actually a group of attackers. Later on, Doomfist would kill Viali and take control of Talon once again. Moving on, Sombra would take part in a mission in Gothenburg after a null sector ship was down there. Sombra, Reaper, and Mauga were dispatched to the area to retrieve its power relay data. Sombra desperately tries to hack it and get any data that she can recover from the ship on its power relay, but everything sort of goes to shit as Mauga starts blasting away. This causes the ship to start exploding and sinking further into the ocean. Mauga's run and gun tactics had also caused the security to be upped, meaning Sombra had to work harder under a very desperate time limit now. Eventually Sombra gets what she needs, well, most of it, and they all exfiltrate the site. Doomfist, upon seeing that this mission was failed, told Sombra to deal with Mauga or she shall be dealt with herself. So going in to confront Mauga and to play the role of executioner, Mauga then reveals that he got a little souvenir for Sombs. Mauga had just taken their power relay so that it could be studied physically, and said that if she handed that device over to Doomfist, he'd be all smiles. Eventually moving on, keeping her identity a secret, Sombra would contact Jack Morrison. She would then direct him to Zurich to find something that would prove the quality of her intel. Sombra informed him that Talon had plans to execute an ex-Overwatch member. Sombra would then later meet with Morrison and Zurich face to face. Morrison would then accuse Sombra of assassinating his informant before realizing that Sombra herself was in fact the informant. Recognizing her from an encounter earlier in Dorado, Morrison at first wanted nothing to do with her, but later she would eventually win him over, explaining that there was a UN storage facility in Zurich that contained remains from the Overwatch Swiss headquarters. If he helped her get the proof, she'd give it to him. She also explained that this one was off the books as far as Talon went. Morrison was wary, but figured that even if Sombra was lying, she had just presented him an opportunity to return to the crime scene. This would be the only chance he'd get to examine the wreckage of his old HQ for himself. He agreed, but made her promise to avoid guards and to not shoot to kill. She explained that the null sector attack was providing great cover. Now, half of the facility's guards were dealing with attacks from warbots. When they got there, they only saw a trio of nervous guards, in which Morrison realized that Sombra was telling the truth about the detail. The pair were able to enter the facility and entered one of its storage bays. Sombra told Morrison that he had begun to pick out the odd pieces of debris. Eventually the two would make it out of the facility with seconds to spare as UN troops began returning to the facility. Morrison would then hand her a disc, telling her that it was an object that was out of place. Before letting her scan it, he wanted payment first. He explained why he never believed Talon was the reason for Overwatch's downfall, despite it being an obvious culprit. Sombra would then scan the disc with her holoscreen, causing a strange mark to appear. A stylized eye with 3 dots above the pupil and another 3 dots below it. She told Morrison she'd seen this symbol before, and that this organization, whatever it was something even more powerful than Talon. She advised Morrison to start an oasis, and that once she cracked the disc, he'd hear from her. That would be her payment, and to her surprise, Morrison didn't object. It was only a symbol, but he could leverage it into something more. Sombra vanished, and Morrison stood ready to start his pursuit of his new mystery foe. Sometime after their meeting in Zurich, Morrison would be contacted by Sombra once again, where she would direct him to Runa Sapi to meet with Ilari. She also contacted Ilari, telling her that a contact would be making a drop-off. She gave Morrison a virus to give to Ilari that would stop Oasis from collecting any data on the Inti warriors. Eventually, later on, Vendetta would show up to take over Talon, and Sombra would virtually attend this meeting where Doomfist was defeated. Eventually, Sombra would leave Talon, as Vendetta was now a self-righteous maniac leading an army. It was there she would contact Sigma, who was still under Talon's control, and she promised she'd go back and take him away from Vendetta's reign. And then sometime after this, Sombra would become aware of Emre Sorolu. She suspected he was working for the same organization that she had been hunting for all these years. And that is all we have on Sombra. I love Sombra. Sombra is such an integral part to Overwatch's lore that she's connected everywhere, and I love that. I love that Sombra has such a big role to play in Overwatch's story, especially now since she is working with Jack Morrison. And now that Sombra is no longer part of Talon, we could see a possible future team up between Jack Morrison and Sombra, which could then lead us to Jack Morrison teaming up with Reaper. I would love to see that. I would love to see Sombra teaming up with Jack Morrison to take down, first of all, this new Talon, second of all, this organization, this conspiracy. And also the conspiracy is a very, very integral part of the Overwatch story as well that I can't wait to see expanded on even more. And the conspiracy is definitely something inside the underworld in London's King's Row. Kace has formed an Omnic gang. To this gang in London's underworld, Kace is a righteous leader who frames himself as this religious icon. Making his first appearance in the London Calling comics, inside the underworld, Kace confronts another Omnic named Iggy, who has brought along a human named Lena Oxton, also known as Tracer. Kace really distrusts humans and also doesn't really trust Iggy due to Iggy having interest in human culture, especially their music. And that tension only increased when Iggy brought Oxton to meet them all. Kace would refuse to agree Oxton and warn Iggy that humans know nothing of honor. He would tell both Oxton and Iggy this before departing with his gang. Later on that night, the two would have a confrontation with each other once again, with Kace interrupting Iggy as Tracer was bringing parts to help fix the underworld's grid. Kace, sneering, would ask what good music would do, and as if on cue, the grid would give out. Kace warned Iggy that while Omnics fought for the whole, humans only looked out for themselves, and that soon she would understand the truth. He led his group out of the underworld with an intention of stealing parts to help fix the grid. And since they lived in the UK, under UK law, parts could not be sold to Omnics legally, which is like really crazy. You kind of, you see this stuff and you kind of understand why Ramasher has this whole thing about humans, like they have a whole law against Omnics in the UK. The day after this all happened, with them stealing parts and confronting Iggy and Tracer, Takata Mondata would be assassinated by Widowmaker, and it was this assassination that sent shockwaves throughout King's Row Underworld, and especially the Omnic community. In response, Kace would rally the Omnics of Underworld to his side, and declared that Mondata's message of peace was now over. Now was the time for war. Kace began rallying Omnics from all across the underworld and would argue that now was the time to strike back. He would take part in a protest against UK police forces that resulted in the deployment of Special Ops. The Special Ops would bring out a sonic pulse device. Kace would yell at everyone to destroy the machine, while many of them actually began to flee. In the ensuing chaos, an Omnic lady was killed. Kace would attend this funeral, as would Tracer. After the funeral took place, Kace would confront Tracer, accusing her of fighting for Overwatch in order to kill Omnics, harkening back to the King's Row uprising. Tracer would claim that she wasn't fighting to kill Omnics, she was fighting for freedom, but Kace would not listen, and that Tracer had clearly chosen her side. He ordered her to leave the underworld, and that she was not welcome here, to which Tracer would oblige. After this, Kace would start rallying Omnics once again, claiming that humans would invade the underworld. That on that night, they would rise. Some Omnics sided with his call for action, and then others stated that they should focus on rebuilding the grid. It was during this speech that he was giving to his Omnic allies that an assassin would fire a sniper shot directly at Kace, just barely grazing his face. He told his Omnic forces to search for the sniper. In truth, however, this was one of his followers who had fired a shot as a false flag to sort of frame this as humans trying to take him out in order to gain sympathy. Damn, that sounds a lot like someone in real life. The Omnics scattered, but as Kace limped off of stage, the bullet grazed his face, why is he limping? He was confronted by Iggy, who correctly deduced that the assassination ploy was simply just that. She told him that he wanted to be like Mondata, but in fact he was no leader. Kace would take Iggy prisoner before he was confronted by Tracer and Lizzie, another Omnic character. One of Kace's thugs held Iggy from a great height and threatened to drop her. Kace told Tracer that the revolution was nigh and that there was nothing she could do to stop it. Kace's followers would then open fire on Tracer and Lizzie. His henchmen would then drop Iggy, but Tracer, using her super speed, blinked in and was able to save her. They managed to escape, but Kace's followers clamped down on the underworld, rounding up every Omnic they could find and forcing them to fight. He laid out his plan to detonate the grid once the humans invaded, and some were afraid of this course of action, wondering what would happen to Underworld. But Kace dismissed their concern, stating that the backup generator would have enough power for their immediate needs. The detonation of the grid would nullify the humans' defenses completely, and he similarly held no concern for the Omnics still in the Underworld, stating that any Omnics that had not joined his ranks would be a sacrifice for their victory. So Kace and his Omnics would prepare to detonate the grid. But just as this happened, Iggy's voice would come over a intercom, telling Case's followers to stand down, that violence would only create more violence, and that their aims would be achieved through peaceful means. To Case's fury, his followers dropped their weapons. Kace would draw out his pistol and fire a shot at Iggy, only for Tracer to jump in and take the bullet. Kace was then forced to flee, as the rest of his followers would chase after him, turning on him. It was then over the next week, Winston would find out anything he could on Kace, and suspected he might be heading to Null Sector. In the grand scheme of things right now, Kace is a very minor character, with him staging a little uprising within King's Row once again. You know, you'd think like King's Row and the UK would actually get things sorted with the amount of uprisings happening in this place. But right now he's a very minor character. But the reason I wanted to talk about him today is that he might have a major role in the future. Now, with him suspectedly going to Null Sector could lead to some more interactions, especially with Ramatra coming back into the story. It could also lead for him to be a sort of a new character coming to the game. But I'm going to be real with you. I'm going to be honest. I don't like the idea of Kace fleeing to Null Sector and joining Null Sector as sort of being, you know, buddy-buddy with Ramatra. For some reason, I don't know. I find it really funny that maybe Kace heads to Null Sector. We don't do that. We don't do that here. Sit down. Because we can see that Kace very obviously doesn't really care if people aren't on his side. You see, the difference is between Kace and Ramatra. Ramatra, the devices he's planting on their heads is to keep Omnics out of the fight, subdue them, and take them out of the fight against his war with humanity. Kace, on the other hand, is if you don't fight for me, then I don't give a shit about you. And he will just kill them and deeming a sacrifice, which I think would be a good parallel for Ramatra versus Kace. Ramatra is very obviously caring about his kind, and he doesn't want his kind getting caught in the crossfire. Kace very much strikes me as someone who just wants to be worshipped, framing himself as this religious icon and using the rights of Omnics being oppressed and stuff like that to boost sympathy for himself, to give himself a better position and more power. Whereas Ramatra doesn't see himself as some religious icon. Ramatra truly believes that he needs to help his kind, and he is not willing to sacrifice them for it, whereas Kace is. But I think that's what makes Kace interesting. He's sort of going along the path of Ramatra, but then at the same time, he's doing it completely wrong, making a sort of similar but vastly different antagonist than Ramatra is. Kace leaving to go and join with Null Sector would be interesting to see if he maybe starts an own little uprising within Null Sector, to see if maybe he'd try to overtake Ramatra's throne as head of Null Sector, since they do have a clash in belief. He seems like a type of character who won't suck up to anyone, who won't be alright with someone being above him. And that's why I feel like my boy Ramatra here would shut him down immediately. But that is all we have on Kace for now. If you didn't know who Kace was before this, then hit the subscribe button for all the Overwatch lore you could ever need. A very quick, short video about a kind of background character within the Overwatch lore right now, but maybe one day will have a very prominent role to play.
Juno, I believe in you. You've trained for this kind of thing your whole life. You have all the tools you need.
Welcome back to the channel. Been a little while since we've done one of these. Today though, I want to talk to you about an Overwatch character who I really like, both gameplay and story-wise. We also share the same birthday and we're the same age, so like, that's really fun. Make sure you go and you check out the Overwatch lore playlist for more videos like this one. But without further delay, let's take a look at Overwatch 2's Martian Juno. Juno is the first human to be born on Mars, which really shows in her character, as we hear in plenty of voice lines as she experiences most of Earth's stuff for the first time, which makes her very anxious, but she gives it her best and still tries. She was born on Mars during Liu Cheng's interstellar terraforming project, Red Promise. Being the only child at the colony, she always had everyone looking out for her and caring for her as if she were their own. She was named by her mother, which in Chinese characters, Juno, means vermilion promise, as she was seen as the embodiment of the project. Despite everyone at the colony always being really busy with their jobs, they made every effort they could to keep an eye on her, to keep her entertained and happy throughout her childhood. As she was growing up, she would be told stories by her mother about what life was like on Earth. She would also tell her of her friend May. Other than stories, she wasn't exposed to much of other forms of media from Earth, other than the Westerners her father brought along with him. While she would always find a way to entertain herself within the confines of the base, the group's curiosity rubbed off on her, as she would constantly ponder what was beyond it. She would beg the scientists to take her out on expeditions, and at least once she was taken out using a pre-existing spacesuit. As she got older, and was finally deemed old enough, she had her own suit made for her. She was now able to roam the surface of Mars and breathe safely. She would help out the scientists in any way she could, despite not being a scientist herself. Over time, she would come to be the best navigator in the colony, now a true member of the Red Promise team. As time went on, the terraforming project was creating changes in the atmosphere on Mars. It led to massive storms of dust that were growing more and more violent, more and more terrifying as time went on, each one growing stronger than the last. When they first started, Juno was completely unfazed. In fact, she was caught in one before, and her suit helped her to breach the dust, while she also braved the violent winds and lightning. She always held out hope that no matter how violent they got, that Red Promise would be able to overcome them. Overcome everything. It was a hope that didn't last long. Liu Cheng Interstellar was not answering the calls made by the Red Promise team, and the second Red Promise wave that would come with more supplies never showed. The team were growing increasingly anxious, not knowing when or if help was going to arrive from Earth. Their days were numbered. They would try to shield Juno from this, to hide the severity of what was going on, but Juno got a feeling they were on borrowed time. They took into account their resources and supplies, and realized they had enough to send one single person back to Earth. And without second thought, everyone in the colony knew it had to be Juno. She was the only person for it. They wanted her to have a life, to have a chance to survive, to not face the incredibly scary possibility of dying cooped up on some base on the surface of Mars. After a while, when preparations were done, she was presented with the gift of her own ship. The team tried to pass it off as it was time for Juno to start her own journey, but she quickly realized her parents wanted her to leave Mars, something she didn't want. She begged her parents not to make her leave, but they held strong in their desires. Juno would run from the bay in tears. This was everything she'd ever known. Her life was Mars. It was the planet she had known all her life. Everyone here was the only family she'd ever had. But after some time, after recalling her parents' words, that the most frightening challenges were the ones most overcoming, she downloaded the climate data of Mars and agreed to leave the planet. She was ready to go. She was being sent to Earth with no intention of returning. The team knew this, and it was what they wanted, to give her a shot at having a life, but Juno was determined to go to Earth and find a way to save them all. As she said goodbye to everyone, Juno left the planet in tears, knowing there was a chance she may never see her family again. But she promised herself to try and find a way to save them, to rescue her family before it was too late.
To save my home.
She said to the team that she would see them again. They didn't believe her. As her ship broke the atmosphere, she hesitated on firing the primary boosters. Her mother, being mission control, asked her why she hadn't left yet.
It is so hard to say goodbye to the only home I've ever known.
I understand, but the colony isn't safe anymore, and our window of opportunity is closing. So let's get you on your way to your new home.
Next stop, Earth.
With a heavy heart, she initiated the boosters. But there was a problem. Her mother would tell her that it was an external issue, meaning Juno would have to leave the cockpit and go outside to fix it. Outside was a rock, caught in the booster, causing it to malfunction.
I think I see the problem.
Copy that.
She tried to break it with her boo, but ended up breaking her overboo. She fired her meta blaster in frustration, but had not thought of the recoil. As it happened, she was propelled backwards into the vacuum of space. Immediately, panic sets in. She is now drifting freely and oxygen is running out. But her mother chimes in, the one voice she needed to keep her grounded.
Juno, I believe in you. You've trained for this kind of thing your whole life. You have all the tools you need.
Okay. All right. I have all the tools I need.
She reminds her she's trained her whole life for this, that she has all the tools she needs. She destroys the rock and returns to the cockpit, informing her mother that the issue had been fixed.
Hear that? We're all so proud of you. I want you to live a long, happy life on Earth, sweetheart. Always remember, I love you.
I love you too, Mom. Okay, Earth. Here I come.
She activated the boosters and was sent on her way towards Earth, and with that, her life on Mars was behind her, leaving the only family she ever had. But she was determined to find a way to save them. When she arrived at Earth, after travelling 55 million miles, she disconnects her pod from the ship and begins the re-entry sequence. As she begins to enter Earth's atmosphere, she gets contacted by none other than Overwatch's AI, Athena.
Attention, unknown craft. Halt your approach and identify yourself.
It is too late to halt. I'm coming in very hot. Who is this?
This is Overwatch. I am tracking your trajectory and will have someone meet you. For my records, where did you come from?
I am from Mars, and my name is Juno.
She orders Juno to halt her re-entry and identify herself. Juno tells her that she can't really stop and asks who it is who's talking to her. Athena reveals that it is Overwatch and that she is tracking Juno's trajectory and will send someone to pick her up. Athena asks for her records. Where did Juno come from? Juno responds by saying she's from Mars and that her name is Juno. Juno lands in Dorado and sends a message back to Mars in Morse code that reads, J has landed. Attempting transmission to RPT. Awaiting response. Later she is retrieved by Overwatch and brought to Watchpoint Gibraltar, where she is united with May. Now she is safe on Earth and is curious to explore and learn all she can. She learns from May what life is like, other cultures, different countries and languages. May looks after her. She decides to try learn every Terran language, and she has trouble adjusting to the atmosphere on Earth. She visits Hananoka, where she learns not to drink soy sauce, and also learns how to play football from Lucio, but it isn't all relaxing and exploring. She has to look for help, for answers from Liu Cheng, and to find a way to save her family, her home. But unluckily for her, she had landed on a planet in the midst of a war between humanity and Null Sector, and her only connection to Liu Cheng was May, but still holds hope and believes May can help her in saving Red Promise before it is too late. And that does it. That's what we have on Juno. A really heartfelt and emotional story. I genuinely cried for the first time watching her launch cinematic. She's so precious and anxious, and I really like her character. And it's genuinely sad to see her have to leave her own planet, leave her family behind at such a young age. Like, dude, she's as young as me. It's such a good story, and I really like her character. She's so incredibly relatable in terms of her anxiety and fears. Anxiety of experiencing new things, everything being so daunting, but still being brave enough to go out and do it. And gameplay wise, she's incredibly fun. A great support to play. Probably my favourite after Zenyatta. I love her so much, and I hope one day we get an answer to if she helps Red Promise. And I hope, for my own sake, she gets reunited with her mother, because damn man, that would break me. But as I said, that's all we got.
If you didn't, we will fix this broken world. Even if we have to tear it all down.
Hazard, the latest hero for Overwatch 2 and a member of The Freaks. He hails from Scotland and is a loud, outgoing rocker with a big heart and tons of compassion for those impressed by the systems of the world. Since he will be added to the game next week, I want to just take a quick dive into his backstory with you guys. And don't worry, for anyone who voted on the poll, the Cassidy video will be released on Friday of this week, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, let's jump in to Hazard. Finlay Doherty grew up in Scotland with a rough start in life. He went to a prestigious school, but was bullied by the other kids constantly. His parents would also fight often over issues like finances and emotional trauma due to their experience during the Omnic crisis. Unfortunately, his mother would die when he was barely 4 years old. Despite this, he put his faith in the system, that it cared for him, that it would protect him and make his life better. Feeling like he needed to do something in his life, he signed up for university and enlisted in the military to pay for his tuition. Another streak of misfortune would strike him though, as shortly after enlisting, an Overwatch aircraft would be shot down by an enemy airship and come crashing down into a nearby building. This would result in Doherty being trapped beneath rubble, his pup Macy desperately trying to dig him out. He would be rushed to hospital for treatment. Needing surgery, it would cost him his feet and an arm. He would be given a monthly check to accommodate for what happened, as well as base level cybernetics. Nothing fancy. The system he believed would protect him, would care for him, didn't. Didn't care why this had happened. Didn't care to prevent it in the first place. It failed him. But soon, he would catch wind of people who did. Freaks, that's what they're known as. People working under the radar, specializing in illegal body mods, ones the government had banned. They could make him feel better, stronger than he ever was. The pain he had felt, they could fix. After receiving some better cybernetics, he would soon find his people. People he would consider family. Something he never really had before. Just like him, they held the system accountable. He fit in just fine, even forming a meaningful relationship with an Omnic woman named Susanna. They believed the system only saw them as a number, like a prison. But they were determined to break free. They would lead and assist with rebellions all around the world. In Paris, London, Route 66. They were going to break everyone free. Unfortunately, after hearing some upsetting news about a group of freaks being thwarted in Morocco, he would think that they weren't doing enough, as their friends were being put down again and again all over the world, until Touch-Up would inform him of something they needed to take that would put the power they needed in their hands. It was at the Ministry of Genetics in Oasis, something Moira had been keeping to herself. Oasis had attacked the freaks, but the freaks knew where Oasis was, where to strike at their heart. Their most powerful weapon was about to be in the hands of Hazard and the freaks. A small team of freaks would travel and break into the Oasis Ministry of Genetics. Hazard, Boomslang, and Susie. After tripping an alarm and reinforcements showing up, the three would need to fight their way out. Successfully extracting a sample of vanadium while under fire from Helix security, he was forced to inject the sample with help from Susie, despite her warning him that it is unstable and they don't know how it might affect him. Lucky for him, it resulted in quite the power up, allowing him and two others to escape with ease. Now they forge their path to building the new world, even if they need to tear down the old one. Now, Hazard isn't the first in Overwatch to try and bring about massive change to the world, to forge it anew. But what I enjoy about Hazard is how he brings a new view to the world of Overwatch. It isn't about humanity preying on Omnics, or needing to evolve humanity through conflict and war to make them stronger. Freaks are all about breaking free of a world that holds everyone back. Humans, Omnics, everyone. It's about breaking free of systems that are meant to be helping, but in reality, don't care about the people in need, the ones struggling. Systems that only benefit those at the top. Systems that view everyone as a number. They mean to break everyone free. That's what they stand for. This isn't the first time we're seeing freaks, and I'm finally glad we're starting to get more information on them. And Hazard himself, I quite enjoy. His in-game kit is extremely fun, and I can't wait till we discover more about him and freaks through in-game interactions. And his voice actor, Connor McLeod, just does a great job voicing him. And seeing him get so excited for this over on Twitter has been so enjoyable to watch. I'm glad he's gotten a warm welcome to the community, and I am looking forward to seeing him voice Hazard some more. But that's all I really have for today's video. Just a quick look at his backstory and what it is he stands for. I'm hoping for maybe another short story or something that maybe dives a little deeper into his character. But for now, I really enjoy him and his dog Macy. As I mentioned at the start of this video, the video diving into Cassidy will be out on Friday, so make sure you subscribe to be notified when that goes up. These videos will usually go out every week on Friday, and over the weekend I will run a poll asking who you want to see next. Do consider becoming a member of the channel. I am working on the perks to maybe give you guys a little something more enticing, but it is the best way to support the channel and me directly. Check out my social medias in the description, my Twitter, my Instagram, and my Bluesky. But yeah, I love you, and this has been Hazard.
I wasn't always the friendly, carefree guy you see before you today. I used to take things very seriously. Now I've got a whole new outlook on life. I work hard, and I play hard. So, I only have one question for you. Ready to have some fun?
Hello everyone, I'm al-g-man, and today I am bringing you some more Overwatch lore, this time focused on Mauga. Now Mauga is a charismatic and cunning Samoan warrior who thrives in the chaos of a battlefield and lives every day like it's his last. Wherever Mauga goes, he knows how to have a good time, and experience has taught him to treat every day like it's a gift. Tall and muscular, Mauga's size and strength has been augmented, which includes a second cybernetic heart. According to Mauga, he was more serious prior to his augmentation, before he gained a new outlook on life. In his current persona, Mauga often portrays himself as being a big dumb brute. However, this is nothing but a facade. Mauga is actually quite intelligent. Mauga Loa Malosi challenged the law since his childhood. His father led the Samoan branch of the eco-rebel group, the Deep Sea Raiders, that became like family to Mauga. They took him along on all their adventures, instilling in him a healthy dose of disrespect for the law. On their missions around Polynesia, Mauga learned from an early age that charisma opens doors, and destruction gets answers. As the Deep Sea Raiders fought against those disrespecting the beauty of their seas and islands, Mauga grew to be a renowned warrior. And eventually Mauga would go on to become a local legend in Samoa when an intense battle left him critically wounded. A Deep Sea Raider medic performed emergency heart surgery, giving him a second cybernetic heart to supplement his damaged organic one and get Mauga back into the fight. With this newfound strength, Mauga was victorious, and he returned to Samoa, where more upgrades and surgeries awaited him. As his strength increased, so did the need for constant maintenance. Always living on the edge of death taught Mauga to live every day like it might be his last. At some point after his augmentation, Mauga and the Raiders fought against Overwatch in the Black Sand Fires. It was here that Mauga gained his chain guns from Overwatch, stealing them from their arsenal. As the Deep Sea Raiders' activity died down, Mauga was thirsty for more adventures. News of Akonde Ogundimu killing his mentor eventually reached Mauga, and this piqued his interest, seeing a worthy opponent in this so-called Doomfist. Mauga challenged him to a no-rules, anything-goes fight, and an amused Doomfist, sensing something in the young man, agreed, to which this epic fight ended in a draw, with both men exhausted but unwilling to admit defeat. And Doomfist was impressed. He even offered him a place within Talon, alongside the promise of regular cybernetic upgrades, and all of the chaos his two hearts could desire. Mauga would accept, and would go on to take part in a number of jobs on behalf of the organization. As a Talon member, the whole world became Mauga's playground, and at some point, he even burnt down a Talon server room, causing Sombra to lose tons of valuable data. Eventually, sometime down the line while in Talon, he would meet with Baptiste, and the two hit it off immediately and performed numerous extractions together. 4 years before Winston sent out the Overwatch recall, Mauga and Baptiste were part of a Talon operation at Monte Cristi, under the command of Captain Cuerva. Talon were sent there to take out a Daniel Fernandez, the leader of the Playa cartel, which had been encroaching on Talon's territory. However, upon reaching Fernandez's safe room, they found that he wasn't there. An enraged Cuerva ordered that Talon tear the town apart until they found him, which resulted in mass collateral damage and civilian casualties. Disgusted at what had transpired, Baptiste tried to flee in a fishing boat, but was confronted by Mauga. He told Baptiste that there were no good people, and that all they could do was have fun while they had the chance. Not finding the fun in mass murder, Baptiste declared that he wasn't going back, and that if Mauga didn't let him go, he'd have to kill him. Over the radio, Cuerva asked Mauga if he'd found Baptiste, and after a long pause, Mauga told him that he hadn't found his comrade. When asked why he'd done it, Mauga stated that he always liked Baptiste, but that now he owed him a favour, and that he should call him when he was ready to come home. With that, the two parted ways. 4 years after the Monte Cristi debacle, Mauga went with Trung Le Win to Haiti, where they were looking for a Vernon St. Clair, who hadn't been paying Talon, so they were assigned to make the man come to his senses and pay up. Aware that Baptiste was also in Haiti, Mauga insisted that they use Baptiste. Win was skeptical, wanting someone more reliable, but Mauga insisted, and Win relented. To this end, they confronted Baptiste at Le Fort's. Mauga's threats were clear, despite his outwardly casual demeanour, and Baptiste agreed to help them on the job, though asked what happened afterwards. After all, no one left Talon except in a coffin. With a smile, Mauga told his friend not to worry about it. The following morning, Baptiste met with Mauga and Win outside St. Clair's mansion. Win had scheduled an appointment with St. Clair, so all the trio had to do was just walk in. The plan went well at first, but inside the mansion's library, they didn't find St. Clair, but they did find St. Clair's personal security training, their guns on them, to which Mauga activated his shield, and Win killed most of the guards with his sidearm. One guard remained, choked by Mauga, but Baptiste talked his former friend down long enough to interrogate the man to find out where St. Clair was. The guard stated that St. Clair was in his office, to which Mauga would thank the guard by breaking his neck, which is honestly terrifying. Oh my days. The trio fought their way through the mansion, cutting through its security forces before finding St. Clair holed up in his office with a revolver. He fired at Mauga, but the bullets bounced off his shield. Mauga covered Win as he confronted St. Clair, asking why they shouldn't just kill him. St. Clair protested that he had information, and revealed that it was an Overwatch recall order. Various dossiers were part of the data. He revealed that he'd received the transmission 3 days ago, and the reason that he'd received it at all was that he was a former member of Overwatch himself. However, the data was worthless. Talon already had access to the information, as they already had former Overwatch agents on their payroll. Therefore, St. Clair was still going to die, and Mauga suggested that Baptiste do the honors. Baptiste walked forward, but instead of shooting St. Clair, dropped a flashbang, incapacitating Mauga and Win, giving him time to flee with St. Clair. Mauga tracked Baptiste to a wharf, that this was a repeat of their parting at Monte Cristi, and he told Baptiste that he couldn't let him go a second time. The two engaged in a firefight, with Mauga wanting to bring Baptiste into Talon alive, and was willing to injure him to do so. Luckily, Baptiste was able to use a prototype device to end the battle, throwing it into the air and shooting it, with the resulting explosion destroying a large portion of the docks, as well as possibly Mauga, as when the smoke cleared, he was nowhere to be seen. However, Baptiste suspected that he had survived the explosion, a suspicion that was correct. Although Baptiste had escaped again, Mauga didn't mind. The chase was half the fun, and until he faced his old comrade again, Mauga remained content in Talon's company. For now. We move on a bit now into the future, where sometime after Null Sector's attack on Gothenburg, Doomfist sent Sombra, Reaper and Mauga to a command ship that had been crippled by Torbjorn in the attack on Gothenburg. The command ship had crashed into the ocean, and the Talon members were being sent there in order to retrieve data on Null Sector's power relay technology. Upon arrival, Mauga left the ship ready for a fight, much to Sombra's annoyance, who stated the operation required a surgeon's approach, not a butcher. Mauga gave her a thumbs up as Sombra hacked the door and entered into the command ship. Just beforehand, Mauga noticed a communications relay and shot it in order to prevent a distress signal being sent to any other command ships within range. As Sombra and Reaper entered the ship, they noticed a bunch of deactivated Null troopers, but when Mauga entered, one of them activated, to which Mauga just punches it in the face. Due to this, the other Null Troopers activate, leading to Sombra and Reaper shooting their way to their target. With Mauga being behind the Null Troopers, he grabbed the heads of two of them and slammed them together before making his way to the data room. But instead of holding the perimeter as planned, Mauga decided to take a walk, to which he then proceeded to fight his way through hundreds of Null Troopers before making it back to the dropship with Sombra and Reaper. Back on the dropship, Doomfist asked Sombra and Reaper if the mission was a total success, to which Sombra would tell Doomfist that it was only partly. Doomfist then instructed either Reaper or Sombra to deal with Mauga. When Sombra confronted him, Mauga explained that he knew ships, and explained that if the command carrier was destroyed, there would be no witnesses and therefore no problems. And he even revealed to Sombra that he got her a little souvenir. He provided the actual power relay from the Null Sector ship to Sombra, and was confident that Doomfist would be happy when Sombra showed him that. He then told her that it had been fun and that he wanted to do it again sometime, and if she did, she knew where to find him. He would then jump out the back of the dropship, saying this was a great day, before deploying a parachute. We move on a little bit to when Freya was searching for Emre. She visited Mauga in Samoa for some information regarding Emre's jobs for Talon, to which he told her that when the two of them infiltrated a black site in Guatemala, Emre was just stone cold focused on the killing and didn't really say much. Mauga was also present when Vendetta would overtake Doomfist for the throne of Talon, and in the aftermath, Mauga would stay with Talon because he believed he could get something out of it. With Vendetta now in charge, she would also send Mauga to Junkertown in hopes of striking a deal with the Junker Queen, to which it didn't go well, since upon arriving at Junkertown, Mauga would cause fiery chaos all across the city, and as a result, the Queen attempted to kick him out, causing the two of them to get into an intense brawl. Later on, Mauga would travel to Tokyo to pick up the anima weapons from the Hashimoto clan, to which he expressed doubt as to whether Vendetta would be satisfied with the smaller numbers of weapons, but Lady Shion disagreed, and promised to stay in touch. And that is all the lore we have on Mauga so far. I really like Mauga as a character. I love the idea of him portraying himself as this dumb brew, but actually being a very clever tactician. And we get to see it quite a bit, especially in the Great Day cinematic. Sure, Mauga goes in loud and proud, but everything he does it for a reason. Because he's smart enough to know what needs to be done. I also just love his personality. He's so happy all the time, even to a menacing point. It's really good to see him interact with everyone in game, and I really like him. He's so outgoing, but at the same time he's very menacing as well. But that is all we Welcome back to the channel. My name's al-g-man, and today I want to talk to you about the latest Overwatch hero, Shion. Shion is an Omnic awakened in a world of pain. Shion gained her sentience in the middle of a war zone. Though the crisis had ended, Shion's suffering endured when she was captured by the Hashimoto and made into a glorified combat training machine. After years of imprisonment spent learning her captors' weaknesses, she broke free and slayed them all, seizing their power for herself. Living her new life to the fullest, Shion has transformed herself into something uncanny and dangerous. Now she exists in the space between human and machine, and she will do anything to maintain control. Now, Shion is a incredibly interesting character on one, her appearance, and two, her backstory and her voice lines in game. So I want to take a look at her backstory and see how she got to this point. Shion awakened in conflict. In many parts of the world, the awakening led to a peaceful ceasefire, but in Tokyo, terror and confusion only led to further conflict. Shion's own awakening was scored with screams and gunfire as she dug herself free from the casualties of war. Knowing only danger and death, Shion fled from the wreckage and kept fighting. Shion survived for weeks on the streets in a state of fear, killing anyone she encountered. Meanwhile, tension and resentment still defined the relationship between Omnics and humans in Tokyo, and local gangs took to the streets to mistreat and hunt down Omnics as a form of justice. Eventually, a group of these criminals, humans, would go on to found the Hashimoto clan and would defeat Shion and take her captive. But rather than kill Shion, the Hashimoto saw her potential as a way for them to gain power. They decided to train against her, honing their fighting skills, and had a philosophy that if the Hashimoto were to become Tokyo's deadliest blade, Shion would be the steel they sharpened against. A killer with machine-like precision, but an unpredictable, sentient spark. For Shion, the war raged on, relentless in its cruelty, but secretly, Shion was holding back, pulling her punches and learning her captors' weaknesses so she might someday overtake them. In all that time, Shion only saw glimpses of the outside world. Treated poorly by the Hashimoto, she knew herself not as an Omnic, but as inhuman, and had little opportunity to gain a sense of self. Shion had long since conquered any fear of her captors, their violence, and in this consistency, she almost found this mistreatment as a comfort. But she had to believe there was more to life than survival. If she wanted anything, it was to be free of her imprisonment and to punish those who kept her in a cage. In time, Shion's captors, now revered elders in the clan, grew complacent and dropped their guard in her presence. Shion saw her opportunity and broke free, leaving a trail of death in her wake. That ended with the murder of all 4 Hashimoto elders. Finally, Shion had control over her own fate. She quickly seized her chance of power, creating a 5th seat on the Council of Elders for herself and forcing those she had spared to fight for the chance to rule by her side. Using her newfound wealth and power, Shion transformed herself, modifying her chassis to suit her desire and crafting a mask that would instill fear. The result was something uncanny. Neither human nor Omnic, she belongs in no world other than the one she creates for herself. Shion lives life to the fullest, gaining a reputation for excess as she indulges in fashion, lovers, and custom motorcycles. Among the Hashimoto, Shion's murderous ascent is well remembered, and her penchant for punishment is widely feared. As a show of power, Shion forced Toshiro Yamagami, a weaponsmith imprisoned by the Hashimoto, to craft her a unique pair of anima pistols. With these new weapons and Vendetta's backing, the Hashimoto rule over Tokyo is all but assured. Now, this is very insightful into the background of Shion, especially into why she looks the way she does, why her Omnic chassis has been modified to resemble more human. Shion, seeing herself not as Omnic but as inhuman, goes along with Omnic lore pretty well. As we know, Omnics are mistreated around the world. A lot of them viewed not as people, but as tin cans and bots. And her seeing herself as inhuman states that the way she was treated is not as a separate person, such as an Omnic, but as something not worth caring about and using as a means to an end. We also get a little bit more of an insight with an interaction with Ramatra.
What have you done to yourself, living as a hollow facsimile of our oppressors?
Would you rather I kept the scars they gave me?
There is strength in our struggle, sister.
Thank the Iris for your wisdom. I'd have hated to learn that the hard way.
Where Ramatra points out the way she looks, and how she looks the exact same as their oppressors. And I really love this interaction, not only because it gives an insight into Shion, but also into Ramatra. Shion faced oppression by humans due to her being an Omnic, and to separate the two, Ramatra takes pride in being an Omnic, where Shion does not. She wants to hide her Omnic self in order to appear more human, and so she doesn't have to see the scars that her oppressors once gave her. But Ramatra sees it a different way, with him saying these scars are a sign of strength, and how there is strength in their struggle to exist as a people, their struggle to exist at all. We also get a look into the background of how Shion rose to power within the Hashimoto, used as a training bot for years until those people who captured her became clan elders. And in a moment of opportunity, she broke free and murdered them all, and created a 5th seat at the council for herself, and forced others to rule by her side, which is a lot more interesting than Shion being the one to start the Hashimoto, where in fact she was imprisoned by them and rose to power by seizing it all for herself. And now I wonder if the Hashimoto are going to start taking over other places in Japan now that they are backed by Talon and Vendetta. I'm really interested in seeing how her lore progresses further, and to see that she's so interwoven with so many other characters as well, and she's not just another, you know, Omnic monk character or another Omnic that all their lore revolves around either the Omnic Crisis or something like that, is really interesting to see, and I can't wait to see how her lore progresses further. I also love her personality in game. She's so flirtatious but also kind of manipulative with so many other heroes. I've also loved seeing on Twitter and stuff Shion being so well received, and I love Shion as well. Playing her in game is so incredibly fun, and she's not stupidly overpowered. I'm so glad she's being well received in game. But another thing I want to talk about, going deeper into the character behind Shion, is that she is in fact a very insecure robot who is ashamed of herself being an Omnic. Going from this clip, we can see that if Shion eliminates herself in game, she says this line.
You worthless punk. Get up.
Which is honestly so sad. But it goes deeper into Shion as a character. She is this sadistic villain with an insane level of self-hatred, which again goes back to her modifying her chassis to look more human. She is ashamed of being an Omnic and hates herself for it due to the suffering she endured at the hands of humanity. And it really puts Ramatra's speech and Ramatra's goal on what Ramatra is fighting for back into the game. Because we are seeing now that these Omnics are not just these either revolutionaries fighting for their kind or monks trying to coexist with humanity with peace. That there are a lot more issues facing Omnics out there. Omnics feeling like they have to modify themselves in order to not look like the thing humanity once hated and still does in regions across the world. We also know that Shion is 28, which makes her the same age as Ramatra, meaning they were manufactured in the same year during the Omnic Crisis by Anubis. And while Shion does have a lot of interactions with other heroes, with Mizuki, Hanzo, Genji, and even Sojourn, I personally am looking forward to a lot more interactions with Ramatra, because I feel like they'd have a lot to talk about. Ramatra obviously cares for Shion through the in-game voice lines. He sees her suffering, her struggling, and he wants to help her the best way he can, but Shion doesn't seem to want it. So I would love to see a lore reveal at some stage of Ramatra either meeting up with Shion or the Hashimoto and Null Sector crossing paths at one stage. I feel like that would be an incredible thing to see, because the two of them sharing the struggles of being an Omnic and being manufactured during the same age, born into a world of war where they are the enemy. And the last thing I want to talk about Shion is that we also know she likes to project her insecurity onto Mizuki, kind of similarly putting Mizuki through the same thing she experienced herself by trying to make Mizuki into a weapon that she can aim and use to benefit herself, much like the Hashimoto elders used her as a training mechanism so that they can sharpen their own blades. And I love how deep Shion has been thought out. I'm glad this is an Omnic character who isn't either fighting for Omnic rights by either violent or peaceful means, isn't just a silly little robot who makes a bunch of funny noises. She's a deep character who has a lot of struggle with her own identity and deals with a lot of self-hatred due to herself being an Omnic. So I honestly can't wait for more to come out about Shion. And as more does, I will report here on the channel as we cover Overwatch lore here extensively. So if you do enjoy the Overwatch lore, subscribe to the channel so you can be updated for when more of it drops. We also have a lore playlist on the channel that covers a ton of characters and key points in the Overwatch story, so you can go check that out as well. I'm currently streaming unranked to top 500 as Shion over on Twitch, so go down to the description and check me out there. It's a great place to chill out as we push for this challenge. We're also on al-g-man Discord server, so you can go down to the description as well and check that out. That's a great place to vibe, hang out with people and play Overwatch. Once again, my name's al-g-man. I love you, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.